Our case this week's going to be Jim Jones. Hello, welcome back to the True Crime Guys podcast. I'm Lauren.
And I'm Michael.
What's up?
What's up, people? We're back.
We're back. Woo.
Crazy month
Crazy.
so far.
Crazy weekend for me. Daddy times 2 now.
That's right. That's right.
Shit got real.
Saturday morning, instead of recording a podcast, you got to hold your daughter. That's
not
pretty
a bad
good
thing.
trade.
It's not a bad thing.
Not a bad thing at all.
And Michael got to go back to bed.
I did. That is also not a bad
And
thing.
he was like, thank you, baby.
Yeah, right. Except for my babies were already up, being loud. So I was like, well.
And it's been a blur. Like, I can't even remember. Was it Saturday morning / Sunday morning? It was. That's when
Yeah.
So it was technically Sunday. Mm-hmm. And that's how I knew, because she's a winner. Right away, the 49ers beat their rival, a team they had no business beating, a better team, the Seahawks.
That's right.
And the Golden Knights won. She's 2-0.
That's right.
This kid's freaking.
What an entrance
My
into
little
the
lucky
world,
rabbit's
right?
foot here.
That's right. You got to hold her like during every game now.
That's true.
Yeah. She'll be like 25 and you'll be like, get your ass over here. The Niners are playing at 1 if you're not here.
Don't even talk about her being 25. Michael, let me enjoy her young and innocent.
I know, right? Flies by, man.
Yeah, it was an incredible experience. I have both now, boy and girl. Thank you guys for all the praise and the well wishes and all that stuff.
Congratulations. And
yeah, thank you guys. Definitely was nice reading all that. And yeah, it's been tiring. It's a different world having 2 kids than 1.
Right. Yep.
If only I had known how easy it was to have 1. Now that I have 2, I know. But
nah, you having them this close together, you'll appreciate it.
yeah, my kid, my son is 18 months, and he's like hitting the terrible 2s, and he just wants full attention.
But once they're out of this, man, you're golden.
Yeah, I hope.
You know what I mean?
I hope, because I'm done.
You're golden. You'll be fine. You got this.
Yeah.
Everybody's made for it. It's just we're selfish humans. When we have babies and they remind us of ourselves, we have infinite love of them.
That is absolutely true.
Your complete mindset changes. I hear people tell me all the time, "Oh, I can't have kids because I'm too selfish, or I'm too this, I'm too that."
It changes when they come out.
It changes. It's gonna look like you selfish bastard. You're gonna love it. Like that's
you get to relive your life again.
Exactly. You get to do everything that you want to do in your childhood for them. You know, buy them all the things you didn't get, or whatever. Or maybe you got too much and you're gonna whoop that ass and make sure they don't turn out like you.
Right.
You know, whatever.
Yeah. Shout out to my wife who was absolutely incredible. Didn't get any. I mean, I would have been like, give me whatever. Give me that epidural.
That's tough, man.
She
didn't. No epidural, no pain pills.
Completely nothing.
Yep.
And 2 hours of labor. I mean, this granted is our second baby, so it's a little easier the second time around. But she labored mostly at home. Went in at a 7 and had the baby out in 2 hours. 15 minutes of pushing. Boom.
Like I was telling you, my wife did the same thing with R3, and I'm amazed.
Yeah.
I don't know if it gets easier because the next time you have that mind game, you have that mental game, you kind of know what to expect, and sometimes that's not a good thing.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like when people get runner's block. When they run every single day, they know what to expect, and they get up, and all of a sudden they can't run as far or as fast as they could the day before because it's all mental.
Yeah.
It could be the same thing with giving birth. You know, I wouldn't know, but either way, I don't think it's easy. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to go out there and say
you're going to go on a limb and say it's not easy to push a baby out.
Right. Yeah, it's probably not.
Yeah, man. Woo. Crazy. It's hard to believe you can just like take a concoction of 2 human beings and then make this
another human being.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Strange.
So natural. It's the most natural thing we do, though.
Strange.
Right.
And then you never sleep again.
Nope. You don't need it. You don't need it. You realize how little sleep you can run on. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's amazing what adrenaline will do.
Kids bring out your true potential.
Yeah. That being said, man, we're gonna hit 2019 hard. We're coming hard at you
we
guys.
Are. We're coming in hot. Yeah.
Enough talk about kids.
We got a great episode.
Forget that. This podcast is
no
still
excuses
important.
here.
Yeah, this podcast is still important, man. Yeah, we're gonna make this shit happen. And we already had a great episode planned that we were gonna record that day, and it just didn't work out, obviously.
We're chomping at the bit to record that one, but it's going to be great. It's going to be released on January 6th.
It almost worked out because we're going to start the year hot with this good episode that we're excited about. And we've already got the research done and the timelines done and all that.
That's true.
And so, yeah, we're excited for that. But for now, you guys get a Christmas present. If you are not a Patreon, you haven't heard this episode, it's 3+ hours of Jonestown, and I would talk about how excited I am, but you're going to hear my excitement in a minute when you hear this episode.
You're going to hear how giddy Lauren gets about this episode.
Exactly.
It's great.
So,
People's Temple. it's the cult of cults, man.
It is.
It's the cult of cults.
There's no place like Guyana for the holidays.
Exactly.
And no matter how much, what is that?
Kool-Aid?
It's not Kool-Aid.
Flavor Aid.
Flavor Aid you drink, you'll die. Ooh, that's dark.
That is super dark.
Well, it's a dark story, guys.
That's right. That
it doesn't end well.
We don't do bright stories here, so I think they know.
Spoiler alert. Doesn't end well.
It doesn't. Right.
But this episode will end well because stick around for the end. We're going to do a bunch of shout outs. We pulled all the stops out. We pulled out all the international people that if you wrote a review for us in another country, we try to pull all those out. So yeah, stick around for the end where you can hear that.
And even if you're a Patreon member and you heard the shout outs from the original Patreon episode, this is different. Those are all gone and outdated. So this is all new stuff, fresh, new reviews in the last 3 to 4 weeks.
Reviews, sticker donors, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And if you are a Patreon, thank you. If you've already heard this episode, it's because you've been a Patreon for a while, and we want to thank you guys. And if you would like to join Patreon and hear the other stuff, patreon.com/truecrimeguys, $2 a month gets you all the episodes, all the bonus content, bonus recordings, pictures, all kinds of stuff. We did a live Q&A, not live. I keep saying live. We did a video Q&A, so you can watch us, what we do in the studio recording. And that's on there.
There might be more video coming in 2019. What do you think?
We're working on some stuff.
Working on it.
Yeah,
that's a big endeavor for us. We're not the most tech savvy guys out here.
We know how to do it.
We're also pretty booked with time.
We know how to do it, but the editing process with video
it's a lot.
So time consuming.
Yeah, it's a lot. So,
but
we're working on it.
Enjoy this episode, and happy holidays to all of you. We hope you have a great Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, whatever it is you celebrate.
Yep.
Enjoy it. Spend some time with some family, and
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, and we'll see you at the end of this episode. Enjoy.
All right.
Now, look at my face. I love you. The people love you. And most importantly, Christ loves you. What do you see?
I was taking LSD, marijuana, every type of dope you can imagine. Without our pastor Jim Jones to teach me the right way.
Nothing just happens, everything happens just. They that live godly in Christ Jesus shall suffer persecution. They shall revile you. They shall say all manner of things falsely against you. They shall do unto them everything that they wish to do, and even
stuff. And they were fun and fascinating. They were top 5 or whatever. But I don't know, man. Like Jim, I've just always been fascinated by Jonestown and Jim Jones. And,
it is fascinating.
Like that's my cult of choice. That's my.
It's fascinating.
I don't know. I just get a feeling from it when I study it. When I see footage of Jonestown.
A feeling of what? What do you feel when you study it?
I don't know. I think everybody that's into true crime can kind of like resonate with that. I think we all get a special feeling, and it's weird.
Yeah,
you can't explain it. It's like a weird, eerie fascination that you can't. It's like a train wreck you can't turn off. That's what it is.
And as I was studying it, I couldn't help.
I feel like I can put myself there. I think more than any other case. I think that's why, because of all the footage and the audio, I just feel like I could put myself in Guyana that day and be one of those people.
You think you would fall for that in that time period, though?
No,
that's what I'm saying.
Not necessarily, but I just feel like I can put myself in the shoes of someone who was.
Yeah,
you can see why these people were there. They all wanted to do good, and we'll get more into that as we go. But like just the audio and all the footage, you feel like you're there, and it's like this anxiety feeling when I hear those tapes and I see the video footage, and I'm just like, I literally like. I almost shake when I listen to the audio.
It almost awakens something primal.
Yeah.
In humans, it's like this pack mentality.
I think it has a lot to do with the children. The children being there, and like all the parents that had their kids, and like, I don't know, man. It's
or that left their kids or turned in their kids. Like it's crazy.
Yeah. The division of the family. Yeah, just the whole thing, man. It just I don't know.
It's a creepy case.
Might retire after this one.
Wait, you could have quit saying that shit.
I know people take it serious. As long as we're enjoying doing this podcast, we're going to keep doing it. That's what I tell people. So, we're not going to not do it if we like doing it.
Right. And sometimes we don't even like doing it. And we still do it.
Right. So, before we really start diving into it, let's explain our resources for this one and what we use to study. I got the book The Road to Jonestown and Jim Jones and People's Temple by Jeff Gwynne.
Did you?
It's kind of like the book on Jim Jones and Jonestown. It's a phenomenal book. I got the audio form on audible.com. It was 17 hours and 30 minutes. I don't know how many pages the book is, but I'm sure it's a lot.
Does it say unabridged?
What does that mean?
Unabridged means they like cut some little things out.
It doesn't say that, but I don't know.
It's the full book then.
It could be.
It's the full book.
Yeah, I would think at 17 hours, 30 minutes, that's one of the longer ones. I think the longest book that I got was 19 hours. I can't remember which one.
No, I think a Richard Ramirez book was over 20.
Oh, yeah. The
One
Night
that we listened
Stalker
to,
by Philip Carlo. That was a phenomenal book.
It's a really good book.
But this book was great, and it had a ton of information, and this was one of the better timelines that we've done for this case.
Right. Did it go into like individual stories of the people and stuff?
Yeah.
It isolated some different...
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, mine
like
did that
it went
too.
all the way back to like his grandparents and like went through them, and I'm like, all right, this is a little much. I'm not going to remember this shit. You know? And I don't need to remember like it was
right. It's just important to remember the different scenarios that happened.
Right.
It kind of puts it into perspective a little better. But
yeah.
My book was called 1,000 Lives: The Untold Story of Hope, Deception, and Survival at Jonestown. It's by Julia Shears. It was about just under 11 hours. But it's very informative, but it does focus a lot on individual stories.
Yeah.
So, it just isolated important characters throughout the whole story and just kind of...
That's one of the struggles of doing a podcast like this, where you're telling a story, and it's like you have to, as you're listening to these audiobooks, you have to compartmentalize. You're like, am I going to need this? Is this going to help on the podcast? Does this information in an hour and a half to 2 hour podcast, how much of what this book is talking about do I need to remember?
Exactly.
Is it that crucial to the overall story? Most of it is not.
Right.
So
some of it are...
In a 17-hour book, I might use, 20 different things that I learned.
Right.
But it's all day long I'm listening to it, and there's a lot of shit that I'm just like going to forget or I need to forget.
Right. But I think it adds those little extra facts that we're able to...
Stuff comes out when you listen to a
Yeah.
book this long or you read a book this long, stuff comes out that you don't expect. Like we'll be doing the timeline, and then something will come in my head that I'll remember from the book, and it really does add to it. That's I think our best episodes have been ones where we had a really good book to go off of.
Yep.
Because like you can watch all the documentaries in the world, but there's nothing like the detail of a book that's 1,000 pages long.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, but I mean, we also watch documentaries on YouTube. What were they done by like CBS or something?
PBS. Yeah, it's
Public
like
broadcast.
It's a really good, good documentary.
Yes.
It's like an hour and 26 minutes. If
Yeah.
you Google Jonestown documentary, it's one of the first ones that comes up. It's I highly recommend it.
Phenomenal. It's got a lot of footage, a lot of him speaking. They've got a lot of footage from
Yes.
him and his People's Temple days up on stage.
Yeah.
And you can kind of see why these people were lured to this guy, because he
Yeah.
was very charismatic.
Especially in the
Said
early
what they
days,
wanted,
man.
He was telling them what they wanted to hear a lot of
Yeah.
times, pandering in a sense.
Oh, yeah, for
But
sure.
you could argue that early on he meant a lot of the stuff that he said. But that's all
could
stuff
have.
we're going to get into.
But yeah, there's video of like the early church services and stuff, and they do look like they're having a good time in there.
This guy is probably the most complex human being we've studied.
Maybe.
I mean, we've
He
studied some really interesting people, but this dude is like, I still don't know if I fully
You don't know
know
him.
what he was. I
You don't
want to
know
hate
him.
him. I want
I
to hate
know.
him so bad, but there's times where I'm like, I think he changed like a chameleon. I think
Yeah.
as he got older, I think he did start to go crazy.
It's
And I
almost
think
like
the power corrupted him.
Someone else took over his body or something. It was weird.
Well, I think power does that. They can change. People can change.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, we talked
you're not
about
the
that
same.
before.
We've talked about it before. You're
Yeah.
not the same person today that you were last year. You're not the same person.
right.
Last year that you were when you were 6. People can completely change.
Right, but there's also a big change that happens in someone who, on a weekly basis, goes and speaks to crowds of people who all
Some people think he's
indulge
God,
in
you know?
everything you say. Like you can't say anything wrong, and all of these people are backing you up constantly. And
Just
and
for the sake of they think you're
right,
and you can contradict yourself. He contradicted himself constantly. He would say,
and it doesn't matter.
He would read scriptures from the Bible 1 minute, and then 2 minutes later he'd be throwing the Bible across the room, saying that you don't need this.
Yeah.
And
that's the point he got to. He was like, well, wait a minute, like
he was almost testing them, like it's seeing if these people will fully follow him no matter what he says or does.
he was constantly doing that.
Yeah, constantly checking their loyalty to him, and we'll give several examples throughout this story of that.
All right,
But I know that there's been plenty of works out there on Jonestown and Jim Jones, and a lot of podcasts have covered him, and this is going to be our version of it.
Yeah.
Don't go listen to them.
Yeah, don't listen to them correct all the things we got wrong.
Right. No one is more passionate than we are on this case.
That's right. We are Jonestown fanatics over here.
Right. So let's start with Jim Jones, and let's start from the very beginning. He was born May 13th, 1931.
It's my mom's birthday.
Michael's birthday. That's how many episodes we've done.
My mom's.
Michael's mom's birthday. We've had a case where my mom's birthday was the serial killer, and now Jim Jones has. Is there any similarities between Jim Jones and your mom?
They're both extremely religious.
Does she have dark hair?
No.
She wear weird glasses?
No.
Big motorcycle cop glasses?
Not typically.
Aviators?
No.
No aviators?
No.
Does she own a cult?
I should get her some.
Does she like Kool-Aid?
Does she like? Yeah, she likes Kool-Aid.
Flavor Aid? I feel like Kool-Aid got a bad rap. Flavor Aid was actually the culprit here.
Yeah.
We'll get to it.
That's true. My mom did buy Flavor Aid more often because it was cheaper. How much did she save? Probably like fucking half a cent.
Hey, it was worth it to Jim Jones. And on a large scale, that 1 cent adds up.
That's true.
All right, so he was, like we said, born May 13th, 1931 in Crete, Indiana. That's where he would spend his childhood, was in the state of Indiana. And they kind of moved from town to town, but he grew up in Crete. And then there was another small town too, right? It wasn't Crete like the county, or was it? There was a small highway town. It was like oh, that's right. It was Lynn.
Lynn, Indiana.
Lynn, Indiana is where he actually grew up. Small little like intersecting highway town. Population of only 1,000 in 2010.
So it was even less than, I'm sure, in the 70s.
Right.
I mean, oh crap, this is the 30s.
Yeah.
Not bad.
Extremely Christian conservative town. And Indiana's kind of known for that anyway. Kind of known for being they're very traditional in their views, and that's how his town was growing up. There was no alcohol. Everybody was, and you were shamed if you did anything out of the norm. You know what I mean? It was kind of like your parents had you. You found a girl early on when you were 18, started having kids, got married, and that was you lived out the same life.
Well, you got married, then started having kids, Lauren.
Sorry, I mixed it up. How dare I?
Out of wedlock, you bastard.
Right, I would have been booted out of town for even saying such a thing. Mm-hmm. He also shared a birthday with Stevie Wonder, Dennis Rodman, and Stephen Colbert. I forgot to mention.
Oh, yeah. That's
quite a group.
A freaking all-star list right there.
Quite a group.
Holy shit.
Quite some variety there, too.
Yeah.
Just between Stevie Wonder and Dennis Rodman. Not a lot of similarities.
Wow. Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah, one was blind and an amazing musician. The other one goes to North Korea and hangs out with Kim Jong-un.
Right. But but Stevie Wonder, Dennis Rodman, and Jim Jones all wear some cunny shades most of the time.
That's a good call. That is interesting. That is interesting.
Okay, Stevie's excused, but not the other two.
Yeah. Yeah, he didn't really need the shades. It was just a look, you know. He grew up in a kind of a poor family, considered a weird child by his peers.
Because he was obsessed with death and religion.
Right.
But some of the examples they gave, talking about like, you know, abusing cats and small animals and shit like that, I feel like that was kind of normal for them. At that time. Yeah, I think kids were fucking with animals.
His friends and people in town,
sense, but
his friends and people in town didn't think it was normal though. So
they don't think it's normal now. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like
in
they're
retrospect,
now and they're thinking back, going, "Oh, remember that story I told you about my buddy's grandpa?
Yeah,
like buried the cat in the ground or whatever.
Right.
Like he's like that was normal for that time period, 30s and 40s. Like kids,
small town in Indiana in the 30s.
Right. I mean, there's not a whole lot to do.
Right.
So there's no skate parks
going
out there.
Around beating animals and stuff and being racist.
Just experimenting with shit, I guess.
Yeah. His father. This gives you a little interest, like a little retrospect into and a little look into maybe why he was a little strange.
Yeah.
Is like he had a different household than most of the kids in town. Like most of the kids in town had wholesome families and everything. He had a father that was an angry World War I veteran. He was actually gassed by the Germans in France.
Oh shit.
And had severe lung issues and health problems. And there's a lot of speculation in town about him being a drunk, but there's also like you could look at it different ways. Some people have different opinions. Some people say that he had severe health problems. Like World War I veterans weren't properly taken care of by our country at the time, and there was no understanding of like shell shock and PTSD and all that stuff during the time. So the veterans weren't taken care of, and he had been, like we said, gassed, which is like, man, you just don't know what that stuff did to him.
Yeah, he could have trouble breathing alone. And
right.
Then,
and he may have also been drinking heavily to, cover up the burdens that he had dealt with in war and all that stuff.
PTSD,
so he wasn't much of a father figure to young Jim, and Jim didn't really want much to do with him.
Right.
He just kind of sat around. He would go hang out at pool halls in town and stagger around town, and he was kind of a loner.
Right.
And that was his father figure.
Wasn't there? I don't know if it's true or not, but a lot of articles said that his father might have been associated with the KKK.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't hear that in my book so much, but I know that the KKK certainly had a large presence in the country at this time and in this part of the country too.
Right. I don't know if he was part of it, but from what I've read, I think he would definitely be a supporter. he may show up at their rallies if they need some more numbers.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
That kind of guy.
Yeah. Well, it seemed like the KKK was like, it had a presence in a lot of towns in the country at the time, but it was like I think there's differing sects of it. You know, I'm not by any stretch going to try and defend any KKK
what they say at
members,
your last meeting,
but
Mark.
I think a lot of them, they were just going around like there was like in Indiana there was like so few black people that there was not much for the KKK members to do. I think they were doing more just like.
You're saying like
getting together
that's where you
and
want to get
smoking.
stationed if you're KKK? Like you're like, send me to Indiana, send me to fucking Wisconsin.
I guess, but I'm just I don't know what they were doing.
It's just less work there, you know. There's just less of them.
I don't know if his dad would bother because, like I said, he was a loner, and I think he was just. I don't know. I think from what I heard, he just walked down to the pool hall every day, didn't have a job, and would just like play pool and drink coffee and smoke cigarettes or whatever, and add to his lung damage.
Right. Well, at that point, I mean, like you were gassed by the Germans.
Right.
It's just like, you know, them things are bad for you. Shut the hell up! I was gassed by the Germans. You
I'm
motherfucker.
lucky to be alive, motherfucker. All my comrades are dead.
Breathe worse shit than this in every day.
You think a cigarette's gonna hurt these lungs?
Cyanide leather rolls these lungs.
Right. So between his father, who was not much of a presence, he was just kind of there. And then he had a very eccentric mother who had had several previous marriages. She was different. Like she kind of like she praised young Jim for being different. She encouraged him to be different than all the other kids. She was the lady in town that was walking around cursing and just kind of like everybody was looking at her sideways, and she liked that. She liked the attention she got from being different.
Isn't that interesting?
It is. I mean, you can kind of see how a young Jim became what he became because of his upbringing. No dominant father figure, and then a mother that encouraged him to be different.
Right. Wow. And there's a lot of power in a mother encouraging a son.
And she may have had a little bit of imagination on her, as Jim would later be, because she claimed that the reason Jim exists at all is that she had, shortly before she became pregnant with him, she got severely sick, and supposedly she was dying. And like as she was like seeing the light and the end was coming, she got this voice that came to her and said that she needed to have a child. The child was going to be great. That she was going to have this special child that was going to change the world.
Yeah, that was Satan though.
Right?
She misinterpreted.
Make an argument either way.
God, why are you coming out of the floor? That's weird. Don't you usually?
Right.
I just thought, path of least resistance.
Right.
Sometimes I hang out in the basement.
Right. So she was told by this voice that she needed to have a child, that this child would be special, and that's where Jim came from.
Right.
And
he was special, all right.
Yeah, so he has this upbringing, and it was well known at this time in these small towns in Indiana that kids would just kind of roam the streets at a young age. Once they were old enough to pretty much walk and talk, they were just, like you said,
just throw them out
not
in the
much to
streets.
do. Not much to do. There's no Netflix.
Right.
So they would just kind of go out in the streets, and his mom would work. I think his mom worked 1 or 2 jobs because his father wasn't working.
Yeah.
And his father would be gone at the pool hall, so he would just be out roaming around.
Right.
He was known to attract animals. Like he had dogs that would follow him everywhere. That's something that a lot of people said.
Huh.
He just had a way of gaining followers, no matter whether it was animals, human beings.
He's like a fucking
Probably had a bag of
Snow White
treats in his
walking
back
through
pocket.
the fucking forest.
Right.
Squirrels climbing on his shoulder.
Knowing him, he probably told people that they just loved him naturally, but he probably had a bag of treats or something.
Yeah, he did. He lined his pants with fucking like bacon or some shit.
Yeah. And there was a lot of weird talk. There was a lot of stuff talked about him, stuff he would do to animals, like his.
Yeah.
Supposedly he would. Some people said they witnessed him kill a cat and like open it up.
Yeah. And then have a funeral for it.
Yeah, and he would constantly host funerals for but that was a little later after he got influenced by religion. So we'll get into that. There was a lady that lived across the street named Myrtle who became kind of a second mother to him.
Right.
She took him in, and she was the lady in town that was known for going around trying to get people to join her church of choice, she was a hardcore Nazarene. And that was what she believed in, and she was always trying to convert people to her religion. And she saw a a perfect opportunity with
saw
a
a young, feeble
unguided,
mind.
a young unguided Jim Jones who
Right.
didn't have much of a presence at home as far as guidance, and
he
his
already
parents
has-
weren't around. He was always roaming around town, so she would bring him in, feed him.
Yeah.
She loved to feed him and bring him in, and she started slowly working her way in with her religion and started reading. Before you knew it, little Jim could recite all kinds of verses from the Bible by memory.
I think she just wanted control of his animal followers. She was like, I need that boy's army working for me. You ever thought about joining the Nazarenes, Jim?
I've got these images of like Ace Ventura where like Jim Jones walks into the barn because he used to hang out in this barn on his property. Walks in the barn and whistles, and all these fucking animals just like start landing on his shoulders and shit.
Hello, this is the lovely room of death.
And he's totally preaching to him too, just speaking, telling him that he's a prophet and.
Oh God! Yeah, I could see him doing that, practicing that shit. You think he just wanted?
He
an
did. There was a
audience.
friend that he had at the time that would frequently go looking for Jim, and he would find him out in the woods, and he'd be standing on a rock preaching to nobody.
Oh shit!
Yeah,
that's creepy.
And Jim would the first time, I guess Jim got real embarrassed, but his friend encouraged him, and it was something that Jim later praised the guy that he grew up with, this kid that he knew.
Oh,
I think
it's
his name
that
was
kid's
Scott or
fault.
something.
Scott, goddamn,
created a monster. He should have lambasted him when he saw
Yeah.
him up on that rock.
What are you
What are
doing,
you
you
doing?
weird-
You think you're gonna be a preacher, you idiot? Get off that rock.
Get out of there, you weird motherfucker!
Go work at the store like everybody else, you loser. Dressing all weird, you weirdo.
Yeah. Wear a color once in a while.
Right? Yeah,
Take off those shades, you cunt.
You look like a cop, idiot. Yeah, he would. Once he got the religion thing.
It was all downhill from there, man.
Yeah, it empowered him. I think he saw a way that he could. I think he always, maybe it was a lack of a father figure, but he kind of wanted other people's respect. He wanted to be loved by. You could tell, you could see it from a young age. Like these animal proceedings, he would find a dead bird or a dead mouse or whatever, and he would all but force his kids that he knew in town to go and sit there and hear him talk about this dead animal and how it's passing on or whatever.
Yeah.
And
he's passing out little brochures with the body viewing times and shit to him, and yeah, it's creepy, man.
Right. So we've got some stories from that time, but the gist of it is he starts quoting from the Bible verbatim, off memory, and he would start not only attending the Nazarene church a lot that Myrtle got him into, but then she kind of started getting annoyed because he started taking it to the next level and going to everyone's churches and tried to make it to as many church services as he could.
Right.
And hear from all these different pastors and hear everybody's different.
You know what I think it is, dude? I think it stems from a fascination with death. I think that's where it all started, and I think that's where it ended.
Yeah,
I really do.
That's
I
a
think-
very good
because that's if you notice that a lot of the people who are the most religious, just die hard religious, they're obsessed with their death. They're obsessed with what's going to happen afterwards. That's what drives them. That's what truly drives them.
Do you think
to be
it's
a good person.
it's worry that it's all just going to end and that's it? Do you think it's
Yeah, I don't think
wanting to not believe in that?
I don't think most people can handle that. The
Right.
fact that we might just be here and then we die and then we just go back to the earth like every other mammal.
Right. But what would be so bad
can't-
about that? Just to go on a side
Nothing.
tangent.
Nothing.
Right? It wasn't that bad. I mean, you didn't even know shit before you were born, right?
Yeah, you're not going to
How
know
could it be
shit
so
when
bad?
you're gone.
Right. You won't know the difference.
There's
no more.
You won't know, oh, God, I had a hair appointment on Thursday. Who gives a fuck? You're not around anymore.
The Niners might have made the Super Bowl next year.
Right. It was going to be our year.
Right. We got Jimmy Garoppolo.
Oh, Jimmy G was going to go.
He's going to take us to the promised land. Jonestown.
But yeah, I don't think people they don't want to face that, man. They don't want to handle it. Because
I knew this episode would take us down some
It's going to.
some deep conversations.
it's going to. But they just can't handle that because that feels like your life was for nothing.
Right.
It's like, oh man, all that good shit I did and now I'm just gone.
Right.
You know, it's like what motivates you?
Yeah.
And I think the powers to be back when religion was invented realized that. And they were like, this is a great thing to capitalize on. Like if we give people something to look forward to, something that can't be proven wrong or right, And I think that's why.
I think I've always had the
lasted so
outlook,
long.
and not to just not. I mean, whatever your religion is, that's totally. We're the type of people that were like, whatever you want to
Absolutely.
do with your own life is your choice.
Right. As long as you just be a good person.
Whatever you want to believe, whoever you want to have sex with, whatever you want to do is your choice. You want to be
Yeah.
in any religion, that's all. We're not going to.
Right.
So if you take any offense to the stuff we discuss with religion, this is our own views.
Right. And we're going to start our own Jonestown.
Exactly.
Let's-
We join the cult. You're already halfway there by being patrons.
That's right.
But my outlook has always kind of been, if I live the way I want to live, and I'm a good, like in my opinion, I don't do anything to harm anyone else, and I'm a good
Right.
person.
Yeah.
Generally, I don't steal. I try not to lie. All that stuff
Right.
is my own principles. And if that's not good enough for God or whoever is judging me, then I don't really want to be where, you know what I mean? Like,
I got you.
I guess I'm my ultimate judge and jury. Like I have a conscience as a person.
Right.
I don't do things that would harm others. I try in any instance to not do that.
Right.
And I try to be as honest as possible. And if that's not good enough, if I need to go and worship a God
Right.
to get their approval into this heaven, supposedly, then I
Yeah.
don't know if I want to be there. If I need to worship this other person.
But if there's no God, if there's
Or
no
this other
if there's no
being.
if there's no superior being, then there's no level playing field for everybody to control everyone. You see what
Exactly.
I'm saying? That's why if you don't have this standard that's up here and you just leave it to like what you said, but I mean, I know you, so I know your morals are on point, but it's like you can't just trust everybody
right.
to be that way.
Right. I see there's definitely some good aspects to religion, and a lot
Yeah.
of people it does a lot of good for. And I'm kind of glad it exists for that reason, to keep people in line that can't keep themselves in line, I guess.
Yeah.
Maybe that sounds messed up and condescending, but that's kind of how I look at it. I'm like, it's probably for the best that some people find it, because some people have made a lot of bad choices, and
Right.
then they find
And
they
if
become a born again Christian, and all of a sudden they're living a good life that's not harming anyone else. And I'm
Right.
like, I'm glad they found that and they had that outlet.
Right.
I don't need it myself,
If
but
they're a positive contributor, who cares why?
I
doing
enjoy
it.
some beers on
If
the
they-
weekend. I don't need AA. I'm glad AA exists for people that do need it. You know what I mean?
Oh, okay, yeah.
I guess I'm looking
That's
at
a good
that.
scenario.
Yeah.
It's a good comparison.
All right, so let's get into some examples of his strange activities as a child. These are like depictions from kids that grew up with him that later told stories of things that they found a little bit weird in retrospect.
Right.
At 6 years old, while playing in the barn that he had on his property, this is frequently where he hung out, and he would have people come over, and there was like a rafter attic up in this barn. You can
Right.
picture like a ladder going up there, and people would hang out up in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
They would take turns crossing this beam between like sections of the attic
Yeah,
where there was like a drop below.
of course.
And during one kid's path across on this beam, he blocked the kid's path and was like, the kids started getting like panic, like, what, get it, come on, I need to get across or whatever.
Yeah.
He said, the angel of death is holding me. And just like made the kid stand there.
I was a kid. I'd be like, well,
until-
what about me, motherfucker? Get out of the way.
Right. Well, he was holding the path. So, but until supposedly the angel of death released him, and then
Oh, I
the
see
kid
what
was
you're
allowed
saying.
to
I see what you're
pass.
saying.
He was blocking the kid's path across.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was one example, and then another example was when he led a group of kids to a closed casket warehouse, so a warehouse that keeps a bunch of caskets for funerals.
Right.
It was closed one night, but he knew a way in, so he lured all these kids into the warehouse and convinced them to all lay in a casket and like basically to get an idea of what it would be like when they're dead. So that obsession with death, like
Right.
you talked about, he seemed to always have it.
Like he just wanted to see them in there, and I bet he really got off on convincing those kids to go there.
Oh,
right?
for sure.
And to do this,
Right.
whether they did it or not, it's just
Yeah.
he was obsessed with death.
Yeah.
Gosh,
Death
at
and
6
power.
years old.
Death and power, I think. Just obsessed.
Or maybe power over death is what he wanted ultimately.
power over other people's death.
Or just
perhaps.
power over death, like getting to decide when he left, getting,
Yeah.
I don't know.
He once told friends that he had godlike powers and could fly. We've all heard this one, but you can tell that he believed it because he jumped off a garage roof with a cape on and broke his arm.
Oh, maybe not today.
Got a bit of a rude awakening.
Yeah, you better go pray up, bitch.
Yeah, you need to work on your priesthood a little bit more.
Right? Tighten that collar up.
Yeah, and like we talked about during this time, he was frequently holding funeral services for dead critters, mice, rats, birds, all of that. Convinced kids to attend. Kind of held them, in a sense, against their will, which sounds familiar for later on when it
Yeah.
comes to Jonestown. Like, these kids really didn't want to be there, but like they just felt like they had to be because he I don't know if he coerced them or if he was just like held something over them. I don't know what.
Where was that one annoying kid? It's like, why do we always got to do what Jim wants to do?
Right.
Exactly. I mean, this is cool and all, but we did this yesterday.
Johnny, shut up. He's a prophet.
We played Funeral for Friends yesterday.
Right. The angel of death's going to get you if you don't sit here and watch this funeral.
Shut up and drink your Kool-Aid.
Right. Now, here's the first example of him like actually being a leading figure in like a group of people. So at 14 years old, he took the opportunity to start and run a local minor league baseball league. So like he actually ran the whole league. He kept statistics for kids. Like that's the reason kids were really into it.
Yeah.
He chose the name of the local team for the town.
So it was like Little League.
Right? Yeah, it was Little League.
Oh, okay.
Well, not I guess minor league, Little League. I don't know the proper.
Minor league is like right before you get to the majors. So
yeah, no, that's definitely not.
No, this will be like a Little League.
Right. He was not athletic himself, but I think this was his chance to tell others what to do. He always wanted to be in command of a group of people.
Yeah.
And they would get together and they would discuss game plans in the attic area.
Yeah.
And so everything was going well with this league until one time when they were up there studying the team they were going to play and going over their strategies. And some kids up in the attic in this barn witnessed him letting a puppy walk towards the little hatch where it falls down into the barn, and he knowingly let the puppy kind of led the puppy to fall from this thing and get hurt. And these kids this is when their kids I guess the team fell apart after that because they were like, I don't know if I like this guy very much. He lets puppies fall.
He kills puppies.
Right. He kills puppies. I heard he killed a cat. I don't know.
That's like one of those rumors you'd say about somebody because you want other people.
He
not
then
to
made
like
them
anymore.
watch the funeral service for the puppy afterwards. I don't know.
Oh God.
Around this time, he had a new influence that moved into town, an apostolic church.
Yeah. Like a very charismatic style church.
One of those dramatic...
Pentecostal style.
Right. Where it was very dramatic proceedings that would go on, and that people would get revelations, and they would fall to the floor and start convulsing because the power was in them.
Well, a lot of these churches like this, they believe very strongly in the gifts that are bestowed on people, like speaking in tongues and
healings.
Right. And translating tongues.
God coming into people temporarily and providing... amazing things would happen.
Right. There's certain people that they designate that are like prayer warriors. They have direct lines to God or whatever.
Yeah.
Things like that. So yeah, it's very charismatic. A lot of running, jumping over
Perfect
pews,
for Jim Jones. He was immediately drawn to this.
Oh, of course.
And knew that this was for him and that he could pull this off. He started preaching at this church. And around this time, because these churches were known to attract a large African American black people were really into this type of church with everybody's just running around doing crazy stuff. They love it.
Well, I mean, these Pentecostal churches, regardless of what color you are, these people are crazy. They're like, a squirrel could preach at these churches and people would be jumping over pews. It doesn't matter really what the thing is. They bring it. They bring the party.
It was like jazzercise church. And maybe the part of it was they felt so good afterwards because they burned some calories.
Yeah, they do. They'll be sweating, bro, adjusting the neckties, man.
Right.
Yeah, it's intense. It's a tense experience.
I feel amazing. The God's in me. And it's like, no, this is the first time you ran in weeks. That's probably why you feel great.
You've been in here long enough to not have a cigarette in the last 5 minutes.
Right.
But yeah, I've been to quite a few of those churches, and they're
Did you have fun?
You feel kind of isolated.
I feel like it'd be entertaining to be there.
It's very entertaining to watch everybody.
Yeah.
But you feel, I don't know, I felt very alienated. I felt like a lot of people, especially if you go to more than one service and the same people do the same stuff, you're like, that's odd that God touched you exactly the same way today.
Right.
It just kind of becomes kind of fishy. It feels very
we'll get to some
isolating.
of that. We'll get to some of that in Jim Jones's later practices as a preacher. And his healings, quote unquote. I don't know if it was around this time when he started going to this apostolic church, or if he always had kind of affinity with the downtrodden. I think he was always kind of into people who were treated unfairly.
Right.
But he really, I think, began to identify with the African American community during this time at this church because he was around them so much.
Right.
And he knew, they weren't allowed to most Christian churches and stuff during this time. They had to have their own churches, and he didn't think that was right. He began to really become a spokesperson for them during this time, and that was something that always, from that time on, was always like his calling card. Was like he was the man of the people, everyone equal rights. He really became a socialist at this time, and that was something that was his main motivation for the rest of his life and all the way to the end.
I think he saw a void and he saw a way to attract and get attention.
Yeah.
And he was like, nobody's doing this. I mean, you're talking about a guy.
Do you think that's what it was? Do you think he truly cared about equal rights, or do you don't think so?
Nope.
I think
he's
during
one
these
of the
early
most
days,
selfish motherfuckers I've ever learned about.
So the word that the book at the end of the book that I read, he described him as being a demagogue that ultimately betrayed his followers, his loyal followers. A demagogue meaning someone who uses the downtrodden to promote their own agenda in a sense.
That's what I'm saying. He saw.
You think
a
from
need.
the get-go he saw an opportunity there to be that white spokesperson for the black community, and that's how he would gain followers and become powerful.
Absolutely.
You don't think that he truly believed in equal rights and in socialism during this time, or you think he just saw it?
I don't.
Maybe even subconsciously he knew that he didn't truly believe in it. Mm-hmm. Man, that's where I'm torn. Like I said, he's a super complicated human being, complex human being. I do think part of him did identify with people that were looked down upon and
possibly
the downtrodden. I think I think he had good intentions early on. I can't help but believe it. When I watched the older tapes of him, I think he changed a lot as he got older and the power corrupted him. And
I think he just knew what to say because he grew up that way. And so they were more relatable. So it was easy for him to bridge that gap as he got older because he was not this lofty politician. He didn't have all this money invested in the town and keeping up a certain image. So he really had nothing to lose. He had everything to gain by reaching out to people that were in the same economic class as him and preying on the things that they wanted to hear.
Right.
And then once you gather enough of them, now you're somebody.
Right.
And it's the perfect way to lift him out of where he was.
Right.
And I think he noticed that.
I think he saw that he could help himself and help other people like him, but mainly help himself because I think ultimately he was always about himself.
Exactly. And like, someone who's that obsessed with death would also be extremely obsessed with leaving a footprint. Right. Regardless of what that footprint is.
He wanted his memory to remain in history, which it has.
Exactly. Well,
I think that was his ultimate motivation. Yeah. I think you're right. I don't think he cared about so much when he died as long as he was remembered.
Exactly. Yeah. And
Here's a good question to ask. If he cared, do you think he cared more about the cause or about himself? And this question will answer that.
Okay.
If the cause was helped more, the socialism cause, if the earth was more equal for every person and everyone had the same opportunity and no one was hungry and everyone was clothed, if that cause could be helped more by someone else, meaning that person was above him in the church and the movement, do you think he would want that, or do you think he would rather be above that person and have less of a result? I think 100% that he would rather be the leader and have less of a result ultimately than have someone else be over him and actually get better results.
Absolutely.
He had to be the guy.
Yep.
And it was more about that than it was about how much change actually happened. He had to be because of him.
Yep.
That's what really kind of answered the question for me because I know his ego was ultimately the biggest thing.
Right. Here's something else. If you're all for equal rights and you're all for equal opportunity, why did no African Americans have position of power?
That was
in
a big
Jonestown?
Controversy later on, not only in Jonestown, but in the People's Church in San Francisco.
Right.
There was a lot of questions raised about why there was. I think there was only one black person on his People's Council, which we'll get to, the PC, which is the group of close knit followers that he had that were like at the top.
Right.
That he would use. He would use them as advisors and stuff. There's only one black person in that group. The rest were white people.
And that was probably the token black person.
Right.
He just picked
had
that
him in
one
there
person
just because in case someone asked why he didn't have any, he could at least say I have one.
When it came down to like the real decisions, he didn't include them. Yeah. Like how can you say that he is if he's for equal opportunity, why has he not even got equal opportunity in his own organization?
Right.
So I knew from early on it's just all about Jim.
Master manipulator.
Yeah.
He graduated from Richmond High School in Richmond, Indiana, with honors early in December 1948. A year later, he would marry a nurse named Marceline Baldwin, and they would move together to Bloomington, Indiana. Beginning as a student minister at Methodist Church, he abandoned that congregation when it refused membership to African Americans. Right. Now, there's also another question that whether he was doing this for power, for his own good, he was also doing a lot of good at this time. Early on, all the way up until Jonestown, really. Yeah. I think he was doing more good than harm to the African American
On the outside,
community,
yeah.
and to just minorities and just anyone, any poor people, anyone of any race. Like he did so much good that it's frustrating because you're like,
kind of like Pablo Escobar.
this could have ended well. This could have been overall. He could have been remembered in a glorious way. He could have been known as. He was ahead of his time, really, in a lot of things. Man, he was helping a lot of people during this time. Like he was giving tuition to kids to go to college that wouldn't have gotten it otherwise. He had these churches that he's about to open up that we'll get to here in a minute. He would end up during this time using funds that he earned selling pet monkeys door to door. You could picture him as a good salesman.
Yeah. Wait a minute.
He actually sold monkeys door to door.
Yeah, when I heard this, I could not believe it. I was like, who the fuck is selling monkeys in Indiana? Like, what the hell?
Jim Jones, baby.
Who's your supplier?
Shows up with aviators and a fucking monkey on his shoulder, man. You're going to refuse that?
Hey, y'all want to buy a monkey?
You know you want my monkey.
Look at this. Damn thing, take your shades off, put them right back on for you.
He's smoking a cigarette, hands the cigarettes to the monkey's taking a drag. I know that happened at least once.
Monkey can get you 3 beers at one time, hop on one foot. Swear to God it can.
Dude, if I'm watching the game and I got a monkey that runs and grabs me a beer, I'm fucking, that's my version of heaven right there.
Right.
We talked about how I don't truly believe in heaven, but that could be heaven right there.
That could be.
Give him a little pound after.
That's
Thanks,
all
bro.
I'll ever get, right? He lays back on the couch, pounds you with his foot.
Right. So he earned the money selling monkeys door to door to start his own Pentecostal style church. He named it Wings of Deliverance. Awesome name for a church.
That is a pretty cool name.
Right? Yeah, but in 1954, he would rename it to Community Unity, also a great name.
Community Unity.
That fits him more and what his message was ultimately.
Right.
He was trying to start one of the first interracial churches in the area.
Right.
And I think it was the only interracial church at the time that was, truly anyone is welcome.
Yeah.
Obviously, I think churches during this time, they were supposed to let black people in, but I think black people knew better. They're like, we're not welcome there.
Some of them had like roped off sections.
Right.
And then who wants to do that? Who wants to go to a church and sit
That's
in this
totally
roped off
against
section,
what the
everybody
message is
staring at
supposed
you?
to be about,
Right.
church,
Right.
And so that's what I'm saying. He's doing great things at this time. It looked like it was a lot of fun in the early days to be a part of Jim Jones' church. Not a lot of strings attached, just fun for everybody.
Right.
But as he gained more followers, you could just see the change in him.
Oh, yeah.
And it just started to get real ugly.
Some of the personal stories from interviews from that documentary were so interesting during this time, during this transition.
Yeah, and so he's picking up more steam. He's gaining more and more followers, starting to make newspapers and stuff. He's preaching mainly about social injustice. It's more of a socialism thing that it is even more like he picks and chooses his spots. Like he knows his audiences. That's one thing you can always. That was probably his strongest asset. Is he knew people.
Yeah,
he knew people. So like certain congregations, certain groups of people, he would he would either pull out the Bible and start reading from that if he sensed that's what they needed.
Right.
Or if he sensed that the time was right, he would start preaching about socialism. That was his ultimate cause. Like, that's what this whole thing was about. Not about God, not about teaching the Bible. It was about social injustice.
Yep.
And so he always picked his spots there. When he would travel around with people, he would judge the town kind of like a politician. Like, all right, what does this town want to hear?
You check this pulse right quick and then get it in here. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, he was sneaky bastard.
He also attended Indiana University, Bloomington, and also attended Butler University in Indianapolis. He earned a degree in secondary education in 1961. And then during this time, he would start his family, and it was very a Jim Jones family. It was a good mix. It was like his church. It was a good mix. Him and his wife adopted 2 Asian American children, and had a child of their own named Stephen in 1959. They adopted again in 1961 an African American boy. Yep. He was actually in this documentary.
He was his junior,
Jim
right?
Jones Jr.
Jim Jones Jr.
was in the documentary that you watched. He survived the whole ordeal in Jonestown.
Right. It's interesting that he gave him his name and not Stephen.
Right.
His biological son.
Well, it was kind of. Did you hear
though.
how Stephen got the? I'm sorry, I forget the name of the Asian daughter that they had. They adopted the Asian boy and girl.
Right.
And the Asian girl actually died in a car accident when they were driving from, they were traveling around, going to different churches and stuff. Like they would all gather together in cars and they would all like carpool.
Right.
And she got in the car with one of his followers and they got hit in a head-on collision. Oh. And his Asian daughter died actually.
Right.
And Stephen was born shortly after that. And her name
similar to that?
Ended with an AN. So Stephen, they actually made Stephen Stevan in memorial of her.
It's a very small memorial.
Right.
But just like give her name.
The black son that they adopted, they named him Jim Jones Jr.
Right.
And it was kind of, I guess, interesting how he actually later said that how it happened was he was told that he was like a very, very small child at the time, so he wouldn't have actual memory of it.
Right.
But he was told, the story went that Jim and his wife went to adopt a child, and they were going to adopt a white child, but they saw Jim Jones Jr. crying over there, and she went over and picked him up and consoled him, and they ended up adopting him instead.
Yeah, apparently she picked him up and he just stopped crying.
Yeah, it was a miracle.
Well, when you look Satan directly in the eyes, that's what happens. No, Marceline was probably okay.
Marceline? I liked Marceline from everything I heard about her.
Yeah, me too. There's not very much about her. There's not a whole lot. Like, really,
My book talked a lot about her.
I mean, there's a lot. Well, maybe, yeah. But, like, a lot of things, she's glazed over.
She was a hardcore Christian, and she was her family was not about socialism, and she was a typical Indiana wholesome family at the time, which meant pretty much racist and all that stuff.
Right.
And so he changed her. Jim completely changed her, and she didn't think she was capable of being changed. She had her set beliefs, and over time, she began to become a socialist, and like it's just crazy because her family kind of like wrote her off.
Right.
And Jim went to the in-laws one time, and they said something that set him off, and he like grabbed all of their stuff, and he kind of almost forbid her from seeing her parents again.
Wow.
And but she always had his back all the way to the end, even when she knew he had lost it, and he was like sleeping around, which is what we'll get to. Yeah, I mean, had kids with other women.
Yeah.
And like she always defended him no matter what, like in front of everyone, in front of crowds. When she had opportunities to really destroy him, she did the opposite. She propped him up. She said he had this child for the better of this other woman for the better of the thing.
He convinced her everything was for the cause. Everything was for the greater good.
Well, because she said at a certain point that, I don't agree with a lot of the stuff Jim does, but I still believe in the cause, and I think he's the right man for this cause, and I think that he's doing the world good. So she was almost setting herself aside because at a certain point, the marriage was terrible. Like he wasn't sleeping with her anymore, and he was not even really giving her any special attention. At a certain point, he had like other women that, were like his stand-in wives to a sense.
Yeah, like his concubines.
And he was using her. He was just basically using her because she knew the business, and she had roles that she played within the church that were crucial. Mm-hmm. And she was also the image that he wanted to portray. He wanted that wholesome wife that was there from the beginning. So any public appearances, she was always by his side. But that was all she was good for, pretty much.
With his mixed race family as well, of course.
Right.
Trying to put up that front.
Yeah. So this is where we transfer into the People's Temple. He realized through witnessing faith healing, he went to a certain church that had done some services where there was faith healing involved, and he's like, this is the future.
Yeah. He like totally envied that guy.
Right.
And he noticed that all his followers called him Father too. I think it was like a church in St. Louis? I think it was in St. Louis.
What?
This church
that he went to?
Yeah.
I don't know.
But it was a pretty big church there, and he was just obsessed with the way that preacher had
had the audience captivated.
On thousands of people.
Captivated the audience, and they thought that he was something holier than a human, something above what everyone else was. They were all sheep, and he was the shepherd, and he was guiding them. And
right. And they called him Father and all that stuff. He probably just went to a Catholic church, honestly.
Who knows? Bought a robe. He held his first large event June 11th through 15th, 1956, where he was doing faith healing, and he earned enough from that event to launch the People's Temple Christian Church. And I guess it was about $50,000 to start this church.
Right.
The church was initially started as an interracial mission, but got many followers from dramatic healings. Some of the examples of these healings, or did you hear about these?
Yeah.
So this is disgusting, but it worked. If you were a Jim Jones believer, then you must have just been amazed by these healings.
Right.
One thing he would do is during the congregation, he had picked out a person from the audience, and he had his close followers that knew the scam that was being ran.
Yeah.
They had
like eavesdropping.
They had acquired some chicken innards and let them rot for about a day, and these were supposedly cancerous tumors that were going to be removed from people in the crowd. And so they would pick a person out, and he would say, "Ma'am, you don't know this, but you have a cancerous tumor in you, and we're going to heal you of this today." and he would tell one of his followers to take that person into the bathroom. They had some sleight of hand going on, and they would somehow slip this chicken innards into this person's mouth, which thereby that person would then spit the chicken innards out, believing that they had just spit out a cancerous tumor. Then they would bring the freaking chicken innards out, quickly show it to the crowd, not too close, because he would tell them, if you get too close, it's very contagious. It can spread, so don't get too close to it.
Right.
Show them these chicken innards. They all believed that he just literally ripped this cancer out of this person's
I
body.
can just see an old black woman in the crowd. What the hell? George, that's chicken innards up there. I know that dude got chicken innards.
Right.
I can smell that from here, Jones.
Right. Chicken innards.
Right.
It's just creepy, man.
It is that he would go to that extent.
Right. He also began, well, we kind of talked about it, plants. He had plants in the audience. His most enthusiastic followers, he would let them in on some secrets so that he could do these quote unquote healings.
Right.
He would basically have informants that would go to these churches, like say they were going to a new town to do a service for this new crowd. He would have some of his more loyal followers show up early and start talking to people, gain intel on them, and then he would have these note cards that those people wrote down the person's name with information about them. Maybe they have a family member that's sick, or whatever it may be. They have a sickness themselves. And then during the service, he would call out their name. They're just dumbfounded, like, "Whoa! How does he even know my name?" And then he would say something about them. You know, it's still done to this day.
That's why he wore those shades too, so he could glance down while appearing to look up.
Right.
I mean, he wore shades inside the church, like to preach.
Right.
This wasn't a red flag to anybody. Like, what are you, Bono? Take that shit
Dude,
off.
I think probably he liked that image of looking special and different too, like Bono.
Yeah, I guess so. And also helping the world.
But I think this kind of thing's still done to this day, probably in some churches, and definitely it's if you go to any kind of psychic, even in Vegas they have these shows where it's a psychic and everybody's in the audience. If you go to one of these shows, I'm just gonna try this out. This is an experiment. You go to one of these shows and you're standing in line to get into the show, and someone comes and talks to you. Give them a bunch of lies. Just say you came here from Wisconsin, even though you live in Vegas or wherever you're from. Say the opposite. Say that you have a family member that is sick or something. But make the whole thing up. Just make up a bunch of lies.
This is actually a good practice, even anytime a stranger comes up and asks you personal questions.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. Yeah, but anyway, see if maybe that so-called psychic calls out your name and start just be like, no, that's totally wrong.
They plan all kinds of shit here.
I don't know where you got this bad information from, sir.
Like at the Blue Man Group, they pull a couple aside to come in late on purpose just so they can embarrass them and do like the whole
oh really?
Came in late. Yeah, it's like part of the show.
Oh, that's cool.
It happens at the same time.
I got no problem with that. If it's Blue Man Group, like they're not trying to act like they're psychic and they have special powers, you know what I mean?
No, but they did get me for a second. It was my first show there, and I was like,
you got duped?
I was like, man, what y'all coming in late for?
Right.
That's embarrassing. I thought they just had that ready to go no matter when.
Right.
Because they could do that.
Well, I think comedians even do this. Like maybe not have plants in the audience, but they have certain people that they know will respond a certain way if they say something, or
yeah,
they have a set response to different heckles. Like someone says you suck, they probably have a response to that, or you know what I mean?
Right. Well, they kind of have to.
Right.
They kind of have to a certain extent if they want to keep their show on track. And
people aren't brilliant enough in general to make something on the spot that's just mind blowing, and people also aren't.
Although
they're not special enough to actually heal people for real.
Bill Burr is really good with hecklers, though.
Oh yeah,
that's pretty interesting.
He just calls them a cunt. It's great.
Did you listen to his live podcast?
No.
Yeah, he recorded one live in where was he at? Nashville, I think, or something. But it was really interesting to hear the people shouting back at him and stuff.
Right.
I was like, man, I don't want to do that. Yeah. Sorry.
He always seems to be in the zone. Oh, you don't want to do a live show?
I don't know. I think it would be weird.
Dude, our show would be a train wreck if we tried to do it live.
Do I talk to them? Do I talk to you?
Our show would be a train wreck if we tried to do it live. We already edit as it is sometimes. Like we'll fuck up some, and then we'll have to redo it.
There's sometimes we say things that probably we shouldn't say.
Yes, and then we cut it.
Yeah, and then we cut it, and so it doesn't ever get out there.
Right.
Right. It's our post-editing conscience.
Not only that, we're both, I think, too easily distracted. Like we'd be in the middle of a story and see something and move in the audience and be like, what are you doing over there?
Hey, guy in row 4's got a gun.
You guys want some chicken innards? So, yeah, those were some of the ways that he would supposedly heal people. And then the crowds loved it. and they would go tell people that he pulled cancer out of fucking Tammy, and then more people would show up next week, and then.
What was crazy?
What's crazy? He probably started attracting people that had actual issues. You think about? I didn't think about that until this second. But if word got out there that he could heal cancer, how many people do you think had cancer started showing up?
Dude,
and he couldn't fix them. You know what I mean?
Thousands.
Like he couldn't really do anything.
Yeah. Well, he had. Well, I mean, not thousands of people showed up with cancer, but out of the thousands of people, I'm sure there were plenty of cancer patients. But there was a specific story that my book talked about with a lady that had
Fainted?
She had like a knee replacement.
Oh.
And it was not going well. And she was having trouble walking or whatever. And so like every service she would sit right at the front hoping he would pick her to heal her. Because just a few services
I bet you actually have something wrong with you. Like, we're not looking for that.
Right, just a few services ago, and there's video of this.
I've seen the lady that he helped walk from a wheelchair.
A lady from a wheelchair. Yeah,
Dude, she gets up,
starts running.
Yeah, she takes a few like awkward steps, and it looks convincing. And then before you know it, she's fucking running and jumping. She's jump roping, doing backflips. You're like, really?
It's bullshit.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this lady was sitting up front just waiting to be picked and was never picked. Like seriously convinced. She was like, he don't pick me one more service, I swear to God.
God don't want your knee fixed, lady.
And there wasn't with the devil if he did.
There actually also was a woman who fainted at a service, and he was known for bringing people back from the dead. He would actually have some of his close followers pretend to fall and die, and then he would resurrect them in front of the crowd to their amazement. And then the one time where a woman actually fainted, the ambulance had to be called out because he, you know, like there's red flags here. Like, you gotta be pretty gullible.
Well, what about when he
point.
healed? There was times when he like healed broken bones, but what he would do is he would literally drug these unsuspecting people. Like he would drug them with like maybe a sandwich.
That doesn't sound like Jim Jones.
He would drug them with like a sandwich or something, and then when they passed out,
they like to give out cheese sandwiches.
They would wake up in the hospital. He literally had like nurses in the local like hospitals and emergency rooms working for him
in his back pocket.
Yes, and then these people would wake up with a cast on their leg, right? And there was nothing wrong with it. And then they would say, "Oh yeah, you fell and you broke your leg," and their head would be wrapped up, and then they would take him to see Jim Jones, and then he would miraculously pull the cast off, and they would walk away.
Be kidding me?
Yes.
Damn, the deceit knew no bounds. I didn't even know that one. That's crazy.
Yes. And he had medical staff.
That's so beyond illegal.
That's
you drugged someone without their consent.
Yes.
Holy shit.
And then fed them a ton of lies.
It's bad enough to lie to these people and have plants in the audience and stuff. That's like pushing the boundaries of law, but then you literally drugged someone.
Yeah. I mean, but how much more of a genuine response can you get from that person who is healed?
Doubt.
And that person is
They don't even have to be acting. They believe it.
They believe it. And that person's going home going, my leg was literally broken this morning. And now it's not.
How I broke it, I have no idea.
I have no idea. So what if the cast had hinges? Is that weird?
Right.
That's not weird.
Well, you know, we knew from the Ted Bundy episode, if you knew somebody in medical, they could put a legitimate cast on it.
Right,
it doesn't have to be broken. You could wrap it up in a cast.
Yeah.
And then he breaks out the saw and cuts it out. You're fine. Believe me.
Yeah. Get the fuck out of here.
The power is within me. Call me dad, or what he could. Father.
Yeah.
Some people called him dad, though.
Some people
later on in the people's temple
called him God.
Yeah. But as we mentioned, the reason this guy is so complex because he's doing all this deceit and gaining power, but he's also doing a lot of good during this time. He's actually doing a lot to bridge gaps as far as race mixing and equality. Yeah. He's going to restaurants that are notorious for not serving. For serving whites only. Right. And he'd go into these restaurants and he had like a 3-step system. He would show up the first time with a black friend, right?
Right.
And try to be seated. And they would initially go into the restaurant. They would be told that there's no seats available, that they should have called ahead for reservations. So then the second time he would call for reservations, show up, and they would be told that, what was it? They would be, once they got there, they'd be told that the seats had been given away or whatever it was. They would always be turned away.
Oh, absolutely.
But the second time he went, when they got turned away again, he would ask to speak to a manager alone, and he would warn the manager, like, you know, I think that what you're doing is deplorable, and that we need to fix this. And the third time he would come back with a crowd of his followers and hold picket signs, and it would always peaceful demonstrations.
Right.
But you know, then the customers of this place would have to walk past all these people being, you know.
And this became a huge tool for him, having these hundreds of followers that could show up like within 20 minutes.
Yep.
And like this caught politicians' eyes, so this gave him even more clout in the community because they're like, if you had a cause
and
you
it was
could get Jim Jones behind it, you had hundreds of
and
people.
it was different in
like
that, I mean, there was black movements, Black Panther stuff going on and all that,
Right.
but they were different in that they were more militant and violence sometimes would ensue, whereas his were always peaceful demonstrations and they were a mix of people.
That's what I was just about to say. The mix of people in his demonstrations is
it wasn't
what was
just
so
black
powerful.
people, it was white people, black people, Asian, Mexican. It was any race, any age, everyone was allowed, and they were always, like we said, peaceful, and they tried other means first before they had to resolve. And so, like I said, he was doing a ton of good, and he had his church, the People's Temple, had a free restaurant that he had put in that anyone could eat. No matter what, anybody that was hungry could show up and get a free meal. They would always have a little clothing store in there where anybody could go get free clothes. Everyone was always taken care of that went there. Now, part of that you could make the argument is that it was a means to get more followers. People that hear, oh, there's free food if you go down this place. Next thing you know, they're converted to his church.
Exactly.
So there's always another side you could look at, but ultimately he was doing good at this time, regardless of whether he was getting more followers or not. He was ultimately doing mainly just good.
If nothing else, he was spreading a shit ton of awareness.
Right. And plenty of churches were deceitful and misleading people and lying to them and telling them that they had special powers and stuff. So it wasn't, what he was doing during this time wasn't really all that out of the norm.
Right.
What was out of the norm was all the good he was doing. And it didn't go unnoticed, and the communities that he was in were known to harass him and his followers. The white people in Indiana during this time, which would end up leading to him wanting to.
Well, it's a very conservative area.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a very conservative area in Indiana.
This part of the book confused me because I think that's where you can do the most good, right? I mean, I think this was a more crucial place for him to be. Was a place that was a very boxed in viewed place where everyone was. Whites only, very racist. That's where he had the biggest impact.
Yeah, but
there was still a large black community, large enough to make a big difference and help their lives.
But a man with his skeletons in the closet can't have people scrutinizing his every move.
I mean, where he grew up and all that stuff.
Yeah. You can't have people constantly on your case that hate you, looking into what you're doing.
Right.
So you can't be in that area and thrive. It's just. I think in his situation, like if you're actually trying to do good, then yes, like your point is extremely valid. Like that's where you want to be. You want to keep fighting the fight there.
Right.
But if that's not your end goal and you just want to prolong this and gain more followers, that's not where you want to be.
Right. Now, what was do you remember the magazine that he had read an article on that had to do with nuclear? This was the time where nuclear threats were a real fear in America, that we were going to get, taken out by communists. We were going to get bombed. It was going to be Russia was going to bomb us and this and that. Nuclear was a huge fear. And there was a magazine that put out an article, nine places to be if nuclear attacks happen.
Yeah.
The safest cities in the world or whatever.
Right. And Indiana was one of them.
Was not one of them. And that became a means for him to preach fear and begin to talk relocating the church.
Right.
And one of the places that he began, he sent his advisors out to do research on places that were in this article that they could potentially move the church to.
Yeah.
One of them was actually in Brazil.
Yeah.
So him and some followers went down to Brazil, and he actually spent an extensive amount of time there. I think he spent almost a year there.
Yeah, people were kind of like, where the hell did Jim Jones go?
He lost a lot of traction in Indiana during this time because his presence wasn't there, and he had other, lesser preachers
like it
doing his bidding
drastically. They said that it was like his regular Sunday attendance went from like thousands to like in the 20s.
Well, he had a younger protege that he had doing preaching for him and stuff, but the guy wasn't obviously as charismatic, and he went back to the Bible, which, that's not what the followers were there for. They were there for the activism and the social change that he was bringing about. And so his presence was missed in Indiana, and he lost a lot of followers there. But while he was down in Brazil, something interesting happened. He was looking for the new location, and ultimately he didn't find that Brazil was the place that they were going to move to. It just didn't completely fit all the needs. But while he was there, he would end up later bragging about something that happened, and that while he was there, he had a powerful woman in Brazil come up to him and offer him $5,000 to sleep with her because he was just so irresistible. That was something he always believed, and it gets more and more out of control.
Yeah, it does.
From this point in the story, is that he was just every woman wanted him.
Right.
He was irresistible to them.
Yeah.
And so this powerful Brazilian woman offered him $5,000 to sleep with her. And obviously he's married, and this isn't something he would normally do.
Right.
But in this case, $5,000 could feed a lot of starving children.
It could. I did it for the kids. I did it for the kids, honey.
Yeah.
Okay.
So supposedly he slept with this woman in Brazil for the $5,000, and he fed a lot of starving children with that money and did a lot of good. So that's just an idea.
She probably gave him 10.
Right.
He pocketed 5.
Right.
And told him that's a sleazy shit he would do.
Or it didn't happen at all, and he's just doing this to just
he
talk about how irresistible he was to his crowds.
Yeah. He liked to brag about that. That was so weird.
Oh, man.
And like people would just
he wasn't a bad-looking guy. I can see why people would be attracted, but his personality, I think, would turn a lot of people off just because of his ego, I guess.
Right.
Women want a confident man, I think, but not an ego that's like this where he thinks he's God,
Right.
I guess unless you're really into his church and you actually believe that. But
yeah. I mean, I guess if you're a young woman, you're calling him father at this time, I guess it's not off the table.
And we got to say the other side of this, because there was a lot of people that went to his church thinking maybe this would be for them and realized it was not for them. This happened often.
Yeah, yeah.
If 1 out of 5 people went there and stayed and became fanatic followers, that was good enough for him. But a lot of their family members went with the person that ended up being in it and said, I just didn't like the guy right away. I didn't believe what he was saying.
Right.
He seemed like a phony to me. There was a lot of people that said that later on. So he wasn't fooling everybody.
No.
But the people that did
he fooled enough.
Get fooled, I guess, is for lack of a better term, became passionate for the most part.
Right. But they were in it from the beginning, though. They were in it, and they were seeing a lot of this good.
Yeah.
The majority, and then there's power in numbers. When you have, you start to have thousands of people all believing that this person's good, you're like, okay, well, there must be something to this.
We talked about how the book described him as being a demagogue, but it almost doesn't portray him in the true meaning of a demagogue, because the demagogue preys on people's worst aspects of their personality and uses that to their advantage.
Right.
But what he was doing was preying on people's best parts of their. He was preying on people's wanting to like world peace, wanting everyone to get along, wanting community of where no one is treated unfairly. That's what that's what he was preying on. People's
social equality,
best qualities as human beings. That's what made this whole thing so sad to me. Is that the people ultimately that were in Jonestown, I think, were some of the best people society had to offer.
Yeah,
they may have been a little more gullible than the average person, and maybe been a little idealist, more idealist than other people, and not as practical about the way the world really works.
Yeah.
But that's what makes it so sad, is they ultimately wanted world peace. They wanted good. They wanted.
But what did they want it for, though? Like, especially the people that went to Guyana. It's like, what did they want it for? Because you're not changing your country. You're not changing the beliefs of all the bigots.
They thought they were changing the world. They really did.
But you're not, though. You're just leaving and going and living how you want, isolated. You're not affecting anyone.
But they were setting an example to the rest of the world that it could be done. I think that was what they were trying to. They wanted to live there for a while, show that it could be done, and then have all these recordings and footage of this place, this magical world that they had created, and show the world that it could be done, that you could live in harmony.
But why
if
not?
You could just set aside your capitalism and everyone's trying to step over each other, crabs in a bucket type of thing.
Why not do it just in California, though?
Well, they tried. I mean, they went to. That's where we're getting to in the story right now. Is they moved from Indiana. They decide that Redwood, California, which was on the list of this area in California, Northern California, 100 miles north of San Francisco. Redwood Valley was on the list of places that were most likely to survive a nuclear attack. And so this is what Jim used. This is where he really starts instilling fear in his followers during church proceedings. He starts to just preach about how the government has that was kind of always part of socialism, is that the government doesn't care about the people.
Right. It's the top 1%.
Right.
Blah, blah, blah. We have nothing.
But ultimately that we were going to be attacked and that most of America was going to be dead, and we need to find a safe place. And he starts instilling this fear in everyone. And that's his means to try and get everyone to go with him when he goes to California.
He lost a lot of people here too.
Well, of course. Yeah. Not everyone's going to uproot their lives and move across the country just on a whim.
I was with you on the chicken innards, Jim, but this shit right here, the fallout, I just don't. I'm not buying it.
Right, but ultimately, we believe his motivation for this move was that he kind of thought that he maxed out his ability to grow in Indiana. Like we said, I think partially there was only so much of a black population in Indiana. We talked about how few people there were that were African American there,
and he's facing a shit ton of resistance in Indiana.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, there's a larger presence of the KKK. His family's being threatened.
From an institutional standpoint, from the top down, you're not going to get a lot of political help in Indiana. It's all white boards. Everything is run by white people there, and so he might be able to make street level change, but not ultimate.
Exactly.
Change everything where he can be like a huge political figure in this country.
He would need to be in a more progressive area for that.
Right.
That's why California was a great competitor for that.
Yeah, and once they moved to Redwood Valley, California, this is where you could say shit goes awry.
Yeah, you could say it.
The train goes off the tracks. This is where he starts to go nuts. In our opinion, this is where it's like no question whether he actually cares about the movement or if it's all about him and his power.
He got a little too progressive.
Yeah. He was progressing his way through everyone's pants and
and beating everyone progressively.
And progressing his way through a lot of alcohol and drugs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Progressing his way through torture.
Right.
Right.
The church in Redwood, California, and this becomes this is like the first spot where he builds a real socialist commune type spot where like they buy a bunch of land and they have like a farm and a lot of people are living together. Right. And it's like harmonious. Everyone's living together.
This was a beautiful place.
This looked awesome. Like when you see interviews with him sitting around in Redwood Valley on their farm that they had, it looked pretty sweet. Like he's got like a peacock next to him. I don't know. He had some kind of bird on his shoulder.
Right.
Obviously not a peacock on his shoulder.
Got a falcon on his shoulder.
Right. Very prestigious.
They just follow him around.
Right. Yeah, they do. He whistles. They all come.
They just fly above his head everywhere he goes.
Yeah, he's back to his roots. On a farm, animals everywhere.
Yeah.
But this is where he gets his PC or the People's Council, and this is where shit goes culty. That's what I will say.
Yeah.
It was very churchy. Now it's culty when he goes to Redwood Valley, and it never turns back from the cult after this.
No.
Once you go cult, you don't go back.
No,
you know what I mean?
You don't go.
He said, "Let's go do cool shit in California," and that's what they did.
That's what they did, man.
Yeah. And so some of the stuff that happened there, I mean, he ended up getting a bunch of buses at like a discount rate from the city, right? Something happened where he was able to get a bunch of buses and he restored them. They had they were old ones at a lot of mileage. Yeah. They restored them to working order and they would break down frequently, but they would use these buses. They had a bunch of church quotes and stuff on the side of them.
Of course.
And they would travel around the country basically, but mainly like go down to different towns in California and stuff and spread the word.
What kind of quotes you think they had on there? You ain't been fucked till you fuck Jim Jones.
Right? I'm doing this for you.
I'm doing this for you, Jim Jones.
That'll make sense here in a few minutes.
Right. It's him with it's like a vinyl sticker of him like winking over his glasses. Right. This is for the greater good.
Right. Silhouette of a guy with sunglasses and curly black hair. They would travel around in these buses and spread the word. One example is when MLK was assassinated. They brought their buses and brought several hundred of his followers to the funeral for Martin Luther King, and sort of used this occasion to recruit new people to the church.
Right.
They made a big appearance. They made sure that they pulled over to the side of the road and made sure all the buses rolled in at once to this funeral and made a big grand appearance.
They gained a lot of followers with these little bus excursions.
Yeah,
like because they would sometimes they would spend 2 or 3 days in an area, and there were testimonies from people who were like, they were like, I saw him for the first time on Monday, and on Thursday I was part of the church.
Right.
It's like just like that.
Yeah.
Like I knew I wanted to follow him. I was on one of the buses.
Yep.
That's incredible.
Yeah, they would make sure that the buses had plenty of empty seats to bring back people to Redwood. Because, I mean, ultimately, we're like, well, I'd like to move, but I don't have money. It's like, no, just jump on the bus. You can live with us.
Yeah.
You can live with us. We got food. We got all, He was brilliant in that fashion, and it's like he gave them no excuse not to join him.
Yeah. At that time, he was really like meeting people's needs.
Right.
There were a lot of people who, they weren't able to make ends meet. They were living worse than paycheck to paycheck.
Right.
So there was like, hey, give me your paycheck and then I'll supply you with everything.
But at the same time, he loved old people because he loved pensioners. He loved people
Social Security checks,
people that had retired from their jobs and they were living a meager life. He would convince them to give over all of their monthly income from Social Security and from their retirement. And he would take all that and he would care for them. Yeah. They would get everything they needed, but they'd also be working more at his commune. Like,
right.
He'd had them either filing note cards and paperwork, or he had them out like gardening and farming, which I'm sure a lot of people loved it. I'm sure a lot of people loved. I mean, maybe that's what they would have done with their retirement anyway.
Right.
But at the same time, he's gathering those checks, man, and he's making a lot of money. Yeah. He's making a lot of money during this time.
Hey, man, if you want to make money, start a church or a prison.
And this is where you really see the turn in that he couldn't get enough money. He saw that.
Oh no.
And supposedly it's all going back into the cause and everything, but we'll see. Of course, he's funneling some of this money away more and more as it goes on, and we'll tell you how, offshore accounts and whatnot. During this time, his ego was reaching new heights during the Redwood Valley People's Temple days. And we keep talking about the People's Temple. Here's kind of a little funny thing. Did you realize that in People's, there's no apostrophe between the E and the S? It's because they were socialists and they didn't believe in ownership. That's what the apostrophe means when you say Lorne's house.
Yeah,
the little
right.
it's showing ownership.
Right, I know grammar.
They didn't want any ownership, so they did.
I didn't notice that though. I did not.
That was a little snippet from the book that I read that he pointed that out, which is kind of cool that you.
That is interesting.
Right. I wonder how many times people came up to him and like, you realize you're supposed to have an apostle? He's like, nope, we don't believe in ownership around here.
We don't own anything.
People's temple is owned by the people, but not owned by the people. Yeah.
But I own you, bitch.
So during this time, he begins to refer to himself as the earth god.
Of course.
People said later that he even came out and said that if you need me to be your friend, I'll be your friend. If you need me to be your leader, I'll be your leader. If you need me to be your God, I'll be your God. Whatever you need me to be, I'm that.
Whatever you need me to be.
If you need my dick in you,
I will
put my dick in you.
I will oblige.
We'll get to a funny story about that. Hopefully we won't forget the guy that he approached in the hallway. All right. Okay, so because he wasn't, he believed in equal rights. Let's just say that.
Very equal.
He put his dick in. There was no discrimination there.
Any way you want to
Any
go.
man, woman,
he's with
color,
it.
didn't matter.
No, you got holes, you good.
Yeah. So more about his obsession with money during this time. He actually began selling photos of himself at a church for $5 after church when it got over. And not only did you get a nice photo of Jim Jones and his aviator glasses, but that step had more than one use. That photo of him was good for avoiding one tragedy or one mishap in your life.
Yeah, you could cash it in.
That you were probably gonna get in a car accident on the way out of that church, but because you bought that $5 photo, avoided.
Yep, avoided.
Yeah.
All you have to do.
So people were buying multiple because they were thinking, okay, once I avoid one, what's going to stop the next one? So I need to buy another photo.
Right.
I would just buy a stack of these. $5, it's a bargain to avoid a tragedy. My house might have burnt down.
That's right. And all you have to do
is brilliant, dude.
All you have to do is a small ritual.
You
just lay out candles in the shape of some cunny shades,
right?
And then you lay the picture in the middle,
right?
And you worship Jim Jones for 10 minutes.
Unbelievable, man.
Facing the temple, of course.
But this is the beauty of it. It's like from Jim Jones' standpoint, is like he could always make the argument that this money is going to good. It's better in my hands because what's good for me is good for the church, and what's good for the church is good for the people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So everything, like every dollar you gave him, it's not going to him, it's going to the greater good. So like that's always how you could look at it. Even to this day, you could still we don't believe this. We believe he had this guy was a psychopath almost.
Yeah.
But some people make the case that no, he truly believed in what he was doing and he was helping people and whatnot during this time. Obviously, the end is kind of hard to defend him.
Do you think that anybody in that sort of leadership position would be
not
able to
abuse that power?
Yeah. How do you
That's
not
an
abuse
argument
it?
for us having presidents. Like, why should one person be the leader of this free world? Like, there's 300 and some million people in this country, and one person is supposed to represent us all.
Right.
I don't think there's one person in this country that could do it properly.
Right. And even on a more closer scale to this,
everyone is flawed. Every human is flawed.
Right.
We all have problems.
Or like TV evangelists like Joel Osteen.
Yeah.
Like, how does that dude deal with having that much? You can't tell me that dude is not corrupt.
Right. Well, we know he is.
He may have started good or whatever, but how do you? I don't know.
How do thousands of people believe that you can't do any wrong?
Yeah.
And you maintain a healthy ego. It's just impossible.
Yeah, you can't.
Look at celebrities. Celebrities all go crazy, pretty much. Almost universally. Like Britney Spears chopped all her hair off and went nuts for a little while.
Yeah.
She finally came back around, but she's got a residence here in Vegas now. But it's definitely, it's got to be hard. It's got to be hard to deal with.
It does something to the human mind to have that many followers, that many people saying that you can't do any wrong and agreeing with everything you say.
If you think about our ancestry, we came from small tribes of people. We weren't meant to. Our world now is not built for us. You know what I mean? It's not built for our reward systems and our DNA.
We're built for small communities.
We are. We're built to be maybe at the most you might have 10 people that love you and then love to hear what you say, but
that's healthy.
Thousands of people.
Yeah, that's unhealthy.
It's unhealthy.
It's the reach that we have now too.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot more people are hearing us than what normally would.
Right, we're getting unhealthy, man. I've seen Mike. Once these mics go off, you should see the ego on Michael. It's ridiculous.
God, I can't fucking fit through the door.
Some of the shit. That's why we have to make so many edits. He's just like these fucking peasants. They don't understand.
I got signed photos if you guys want them. I got
good for one tragedy.
$8.
$8 kicking it up.
Inflation, bitch. This was in the 70s.
Yeah, we're fucking 40 years past this. 50 years. Shit.
Yeah, it should be $16.
That's true. Plus tax.
Judging by the economic math I didn't just do.
All right. Your Patreon contribution is not enough. People, step it up. Sell your house. We need your. We need your retirement.
We need to invest in some vans.
Any elderly? Any elderly? We need your Social Security checks.
We need creep vans at every corner of the nation.
Right. So during this time, he's known to be abusing drugs. Now it's gotten to, he may have always been kind of on something, but
It's just known now.
Yeah. Now at this point, there's people on his buses that have said like, yeah, I noticed this like foul smelling alcohol breath, and realized that Jim Jones was next to me.
Right.
You know, and then he's
tell the story about when he approached that one girl in one of the buses.
Oh yeah, he made her go in the bathroom. They're on doing one of their bus tours.
Well, he just came up and sat down beside her. And
Did he say something like, "You know what I need to do to you" or something?
No,
like
he said,
that?
"Do you know what you do to me?"
Oh, okay.
And then she just was like didn't know what to say, and he was like, "Meet me in the back room." Or whatever.
So he went on to one of the buses, and in his bus, he had his own room, of course.
Yeah, he had like an office in the back.
Because Father needed time for rest and stuff like that, even though they were all working their fingers to the bone. That's another thing about this community in Redwood Valley. Everyone is working like 18 hours a day. And it's a competition. He's created this environment where everyone is supposed to praise each other for going above and beyond, to the point where everyone's sleeping like 2 hours. And then it's that's like a prize thing. Like, it's a badge of honor if you got so little sleep that you're delirious, and that just makes him even all the more powerful, because then they believe everything he says even more. They're all delirious from lack of sleep, working for the cause. There's people that have day jobs, giving all their money from their day job, and they're working in like a different city. Say they're working in San Francisco, then they have to take an hour or two bus ride back up to Redwood Valley, and then work more on the commune. There, and they never get any sleep.
There was one lady that said she was up for 6 days. 6 days.
Yep. And proud about it.
Yeah, that was a badge of honor, like Lauren said earlier. That meant you were more for the cause than somebody else.
Right. Yep. And so he tells this woman to go into his private room on the bus. And this is during, after everyone was, I think they pulled over at a rest stop, and everyone was going to the bathroom. And of course, you've got several hundred people at a rest stop. There's going to be a line. It takes a long time when they stop for rest stops.
Right.
And so he lines everybody up and gets them away. And they don't realize that he snuck this girl off into the private room in his bus, where he promptly walks in, pulls down his pants, and proceeds to have sex with her. And then she said that she's laying there just in disbelief of what just happened.
Yeah.
And kind of sick to her stomach. And he says, "I did this for you."
Well, at least
this is
that's
all
what
for
she
you.
says.
He started
now.
convincing people in his congregation, mainly in the PC, the People's Council, the smaller group of of his advisors and stuff. That's when the real weirdness was shown, was to that smaller group of people.
Absolutely.
They saw his issues.
But the problem there was
he started to convince them all that he needed to have sex with them for their own good, that everyone is a homosexual. He started telling them that.
Crazy shit. Like, yeah, everyone's a homosexual. He's the only heterosexual on earth. Men want to be with men, women want to be with women. But really, he just wanted to keep everybody so sex starved that when they were with him, you know what I mean?
He was the only one that could fix them by having sex with them.
Exactly.
And men included. So tell the story of the one guy that he came up to in the hallway, right?
Oh, my God. Yeah, so
this guy's still alive. He made it through it, and he tells a story.
I think his name is Larry.
He's the one who's...
We're going to call him Larry.
He had a tragic day in Jonestown that day. His wife and his son died that day. But we're
not fast forwarding to that right now. We're trying to be funny right now.
Okay.
Way to go.
Sorry, killed the moment.
What a downer. No, so Larry goes in, and he has to go to like the back office, I guess, like behind the
Larry was high up. He was
he was high up. He was taking something to like one of the secretaries or some shit.
Mm-hmm.
And then he came out, and as he was walking back, Jim Jones was coming out of his office. And he was like, "Hey,"
puts his hand on his shoulder.
He's like, "Larry, how's it going?" You know, whatever. He's like, "Oh, it's going good." And he's like, "Well, come here." He came over to him, and he like grabbed him by the back of the neck. Like, you know what I mean? That's like what you do to
power move.
Yeah, it's a power move. It really is.
That and the Italian strong arm, when Italian men grab the woman by the back of the arm and like pinch the back of her.
Oh yeah.
Come here, get over here.
But he grabbed the back of his neck and
let me tell you something.
He was like, "If you ever want to be fucked in the ass, just let me know."
Right.
Like,
this guy's just.
Where did this come from? Like, this guy's literally about to go out.
I could do that for you. I could do that for you.
Yeah. He's like, "I've helped a lot of people that way."
Right.
Like, how?
Right.
What the fuck? What are you helping? And then this guy would go out and preach all these quote unquote, gospel and good things to all these people, thousands of people, right after having said that.
Oh, he also, I think a lot of people in his church, he did things differently. It was different than any church they'd been to, obviously. But there was a good example is that someone said that at one certain congregation, he was known for being a potty mouth. Like, he would just curse openly, which is different than most pastors they'd ever met.
Yep.
And at one specific day during church,
Right.
he had everyone with the windows open in this church scream "fuck." Children included. Everyone scream at the top of their lungs.
I
Fuck.
did not know that.
Yeah, so it's just kind of funny, like imagining someone walking by this church.
No,
just
could you imagine like a visitor coming in, like they're walking in? Fuck. Well, Sherry, let's go ahead and go around the corner. We'll try that other church you were talking about.
Right. So yeah, there's just the guy just did things differently, and that attracted a lot of people because they
Yeah.
that
was different because it was like a sideshow. It was like, let's show up and let's see what Jim Jones is going to do today. Is he going to yell fuck? Is he going to point out? Is he going to spank someone in front of service? Is he going to throw his Bible?
Right.
Like, it's crazy.
But it just got so psycho. It just got so crazy in Redwood Valley because I think mainly because of the drug abuse that he was doing. He was on probably due to lack of sleep and stress mainly.
And he was on speed.
But he was on uppers and downers, Quaaludes and amphetamines.
Yeah.
So he's doing like speed.
Yeah.
And then Quaalude, like basically, if he had a rough day in front of him where he had a lot of stuff to do, he would do speed. And then when he had his last, say, church proceedings, or he had his last meeting with his PC or whatever he was doing, or he traveled somewhere, when it was time for sleep, he couldn't sleep because he'd been doing fucking speed. So then he would take Quaaludes or some kind of tranquilizer to put him to sleep. So when he was out, he was out. Mm-hmm. People said like he would just be out.
Right.
Like
and he had pre-recordings like on cassette tapes that his close henchmen would play over the loudspeakers and stuff or whatever, just so people would know that or they would think that he's still awake.
Right.
You know.
And the sleeping with members of the church is getting out of control, and he was always telling them is because he was doing it for them. They needed it to stay focused. He was an understanding God, an understanding Father. He needed to fuck you so that you could keep your eye on the prize.
Right. You need to release that sexual energy,
right,
so you can focus on what you're supposed to be doing.
And he's doing a lot of things for himself. He's going on. People think that he's always gone because he's doing church missions. He's doing stuff that's better for People's Temple. Mm-hmm. But a lot of times he's going on vacation with his family. He's going on these 2-week vacations,
right,
Hawaii, wherever.
Yeah.
But in his own mind, he had the general mindset that if it was good for him, then it was good for the church. So he needed to clear his mind, and ultimately it was for the best for the church. It was best for everybody.
Absolutely.
Whatever's good for him, good for everybody.
Yeah.
That's his ego. It was at that point.
He's Jim Jones.
All the way to the end.
I'm Jim Jones, bitch.
We all need to die. I'm deciding that for you guys. Everything is right. Whatever he decided was everyone's decision.
Yeah.
At this time, he slept with a woman named Grace Stowen. Now, Grace and Timothy Stowen were two hardcore members of the People's Church.
Right.
Timothy Stowen was almost like second in command, if there was a thing.
He was the lawyer.
There wasn't really a second in command, but if you had to choose one, it would have been Timothy Stowen. He was Jim's lawyer. He was Jim's protection from the outside world, from anyone that came after him, anyone that tried to suit him. Timothy was a very talented lawyer and someone that could have been successful anywhere else.
Right.
But he got sucked into this whole thing with the People's Temple, and he was like high up. He was part of the PC. And he was married to Grace Stowen, and they were going through a rocky time with their marriage during this time. Grace, they were kind of split up, but not really. They're still married.
Right.
And Jim Jones got Grace pregnant.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jim's lawyer, he gets her wife pregnant, and they end up having a child. And he would actually have Jim would write up. This tells you like the weird.
And this was still not proven either. It still could have been Tim.
It could have been Tim that wrote it, but people believe it was Jim.
No, I mean, Tim could have still been the father. It wasn't defined because when the boy, because of the way the time was, it could have still been Tim.
But Jim had power. Jim Jones wanted this kid to be his.
And they said he had features that he could have gotten from either man, then also from Grace. So it was kind of hard to tell.
So there would have to be a way that this could be explained to the church. Right. They can't. They couldn't have just had infidelity and just had this. Gotten this other member of the church pregnant for no reason. So on February 6, 1972, Tim Stowen signed a document claiming that the real father of John Victor, which was the kid's name, was not himself, but was instead Jim Jones. In the affidavit, Stowen said that he had entreated Jim Jones to father a child with Grace because he himself could not, and because Jim Jones was the most compassionate, honest, and courageous human being the world contains. The document.
Wow.
Now, this is the real crazy, just disgusting part, is that Jim had written this himself, made Tim say that he wrote it, and then he took this document signed by Tim to Jim's wife. Jim took it to his own wife, Marceline, and made her sign this thing saying that he had knocked up this other woman, had a child with her, and that she was basically consenting to this whole thing, and that this is what she wanted. It was for the best of the church and whatnot. But really, he cheated on his wife, had a kid, a son named.
What does this piece of paper in his mind signify? Like how
His power over everyone.
No, I mean, like, how does it like ease his conscience? How does that explain it to the people? I just don't. I can't get past these little signed documents that he was always making people do.
It does, I think, in his mind to the crowd, to the followers, is just say how much Tim Stone believed in him and that he couldn't have his own child, so he wanted Jim because there's no better person than Jim to have his wife have a kid with, because then it's.
And how do you see that as a member
positive?
of the church? No, as a member of the church.
I think he saw it, and that ultimately, Tim's just as ingratiated and just as much of a believer as I am. Of course, you would want the father to father your child if you couldn't have your own, right? Of course. So I think in his own mind, it was just more devotion to him.
Yeah.
And of course, Marceline had a hard time dealing with this. It's said after this that she was never the same. She was always depressed following this, and their marriage began to divide apart.
Right.
Obviously he's sleeping around and he would end up having kind of a second wife within this thing that was behind the scenes, his behind the scenes wife, but she was always as we discussed earlier, the front woman.
She was the image wife.
The image wife, yeah. That's a perfect way to say it. Jim, we talked about the PC, the People's Council. He's doing all these meetings with the PC Council, long hours into the night, and that's where the real weirdness is going on. People are getting beaten in these meetings.
Right.
He would even have people box each other. Like if someone did something he didn't like within the People's Council, he would have them put on boxing gloves, and the person who did something wrong would have to box 3 or 4 people back to back.
Yep.
And there was times where people were getting knocked out cold.
Yeah,
and then they would have water
up.
poured on their face.
Yep.
Be woken up and then be forced to box even more. Some people were being spanked. People were showing up to work with welts. That's how he had one of his earliest defectors, was a woman that was in the PC that went to work with welts on, and when someone recognized them, she broke down and started crying and admitted to them that she had joined this church and that these weird meetings were going on where she was being abused, and they convinced her to leave the church where she had her son and husband there, and she had to leave them, and she knew that she couldn't bother to try and get them to leave with her because it was useless.
And plus they would turn her in, and then she would be punished again.
Yeah, it so much reminds me of Scientology. It's all these organizations that become powerful, and then it's all about thought police, and everyone is policing each other. Everyone's watching over. You might have a son that would rat you out to Jim if you said something against the church. That's the environment that he created.
Yeah,
all the way to the end.
Right. Now, also, he made every member of the PC sign names at the bottom of blank sheets of paper. Mm-hmm. That way he could write or type whatever he wanted on that paper.
Oh man, that was creepy.
And it was like a loyalty test. So he literally had everybody by the balls.
He could write on that paper that you had murdered someone, and then it's your signature at the bottom that he could turn into the police. Yeah.
Yep.
And they did it.
He kept this stuff on file for people and threatened them, like, you want to leave, or...
He had many brilliant ways of keeping people's alliance or keeping their loyalty, and not because they wanted to, but because they had no other choice.
Brilliant. It's a good word.
In the end, in Jones... No, I mean, it was brilliant in that it worked.
Yeah.
And you could, from their aspect, what are they supposed to do? Like in Jonestown, he used children against people that wanted to leave.
Yep.
Because something in Redwood Valley... and that carried on into Jonestown was that when they were in these communes, these communities, these socialist communities that they had created on the farm, your kid was everybody's kid.
Yeah.
If you had a son in the commune, that son was now everyone's son. So you couldn't just leave and take your kid with you. That kid was viewed as everyone's property.
Yeah, and that's like a weird psychological game he was playing, because he would have these kids, being raised by all these different people and staying with them.
So if you try to take your kid that was biologically yours away, it was like you were taking everyone else's son from them.
Yeah.
Or daughter.
And then that kid is being raised feeling one with everyone, and everyone follows Jim Jones. So, they didn't have a whole lot of rebellion from young people, because they just felt like this was the norm. Like this was just how you are supposed to be raised.
Right. Now, it took him a little while to get to get momentum going in Redwood Valley, but eventually, over the years, it got to the point where that church was really doing well there, and it had the commune that was doing really well. But one thing he was missing, in his opinion, was he didn't view that area as having the potential to give him what he wanted, which was political influence. He wanted to make his way into Congress or have an ultimate, having connections to the government or to the leaders of a city or something like that. And he viewed San Francisco as the place where he could make this happen. He viewed San Francisco was a perfect hotbed for social change at the time. A lot was going on in San Francisco. This is Harvey Milk days. There's a lot of activism going on there. A lot of people are kind of already on the train that he's on, and his church is like it's kind of like he's moving into the perfect spot. Like the timing was perfect for People's Temple to move to San Francisco. So they made the move in 1974, and they would be there till 1977. This is where his popularity was used to get political gain. He would use the congregation for political rallies and make it seem like whatever cause had the support it needed. So he made his way into George Moscone, who was a Democratic person that was running for the mayor seat.
Yeah.
In San Francisco at the time in 1975.
Right.
And George Moscone saw the opportunity at hand where these are a bunch of people that believe they were on the Democratic side, and he had the ability, like you said, produce hundreds of people at once.
Yep.
For his rallies.
And Moscone only won that election by like 1,000 votes.
Yeah.
And so that was hugely contributed to the church.
He ended up, so George Moscone ended up winning the election, became mayor during the time.
Yeah.
And it was, like you said, a lot of people viewed it large in part in help to Jim Jones.
Yep.
And so he was kind of indebted to Jim Jones at this time, and which is how Jim ended up getting the head of the San Francisco's Housing Authority.
Oh, man, this was crazy.
Yeah.
So, like, with these meetings, when he would speak at the Housing Authority meetings, like, tons of people
He would have his
People's Temple
followers
would
there.
show up, and they would just cheer at everything he said.
Yep.
Just everything.
Then he would stop talking, and they would sit down and be quiet again.
And someone give me a glass of water. Woo!
Yeah.
The father needs water.
Right. So it's so much so that the mayor advised him to maintain a low profile, but he continued to use the church to make his meetings look good. Jones personally met during this time with vice presidential candidate Walter Mondale and First Lady Rosalind Carter. Guests at a large 1976 testimonial dinner for Jones included Governor Jerry Brown, Lieutenant Governor Mary Mervyn DeMalley, and Assemblyman Willie Brown, who ended up being someone that he worked with a lot, Willie Brown.
And there's pictures of him with most of these people.
Right.
Yeah, if you Google it, it's pretty interesting. There he is in the background, the only cunt wearing shades.
Right. And he would use the meeting with Rosalind Carter as a means to getting his land down in Guyana, which we're going to transition into soon. But he used Rosalind Carter when he talked to the government officials in Guyana. He name dropped.
Oh yeah, of course.
I mean, he had like one meeting with Rosalind Carter.
Yeah.
But of course, he was bringing it up everywhere, like they were old friends. You know,
Right.
kind of like the Lincoln letter in The Hateful Eight, if you've seen that. Yeah. It's like, oh yeah, I was pen pals with Rosalind Carter.
Yeah.
You know, me and Rosalind, we go back.
We go way
you know,
back.
I was just hanging out with the other night, having drinks.
Right. We're meeting for coffee.
Yeah,
tomorrow.
so he name drops her to the government officials in Guyana, and that's a big help. You know, it's a big reason why they saw him as this big connected American. But there's other reasons why the Guyanese government allowed them to come in, and we'll get to those. But
Right.
during this time, his church is making tons of money, and this is where he's got so much money. He's like squirreling it. He goes to his attorney, and they start figuring out ways to store the money offshore so they can be out of the eyes of the government
everything, yeah.
taxed and all that. I mean, obviously the church doesn't get taxed. He was recognized as an official church,
Right.
which was something that would later when people started cracking down on Jim, I want to bring this up now, even though it's ahead of time because we'll probably forget. But later on, when he was under fire and publicly and everything,
Right.
I forget who it was. Somebody in the government went to one of his churches and saw that there was nothing religious in his church. There was no like pictures of Jesus. There was no
of course
Bibles
not.
anywhere.
That's distracting from the one true
that made
God.
them question that this was a way that they would try to take him down. Was they question like, does he deserve tax exemption? He's not an actual church.
It's not yeah, but you can't go by
It's
that.
it's a touchy thing,
Yeah,
right?
it's
Like, when you start to determine what is a church and what's not a church, and what beliefs
Where
are.
do you draw the line?
Yeah, do you have to believe in Jesus for it to be church?
Right.
Now we got to start talking about shit going awry in San Francisco. Things start to fall apart. It was going great. He could have been. It's looking at this point like he could have made it. There could have been no ceiling to as far as he could have gone in politics if he wanted to go into politics. You know, if he wanted to continue on that path. But things started to unravel because of his own undoing. I mean, shit started to come out. We started to see some defectors because of the weirdness that was going on in the People's Council. Some of the members,
embarrassing people. There was like one case where he forced a woman to strip naked.
Right, and
like,
everybody just like there was everybody was basically making fun of her body and pointing out things, you know.
Yeah, literally talking about her body, like in like.
And the reason that this was brought about is she had slipped a note to him about being attracted to him or something like that, and he made it known during the People's Council. He probably wrote the letter himself just to stroke his own ego.
Yeah.
But someone brought up in the council that she should be stripped naked. Let's see if you even got if anything's worth it, for Jim. And then they spent the entire time just making fun of her to the point where she's just...
How do you not jump ship right there?
Right. And one of the members that spoke in the documentary talked about how this was a turning moment for some of the members in the People's Council, the ones that thought that this was completely wrong.
Yeah. But yet they stayed.
Because they saw Jim gave consent to make her strip, and then was just you could see the joy in his face as everyone was tearing her down. He was kind of looking down his glasses, smiling like, haha, I've got them tearing each other apart for my own enjoyment. And so a couple of members of this were just disgusted by this, and they started realizing, like, this is what we're a part of is not what we thought it was.
Right.
And we start to see some defectors, and during this time, he's become so successful, and he's involved in politics. So of course the media and like local writers and like newspaper article writers and stuff like that.
Right.
They start to write articles about the People's Temple. Not all good. They start to talk to some of these defectors, start to go to these like the San Francisco Chronicle and stuff like that, and start telling their stories of what's really going on.
Yep.
And he gets wind of this stuff.
He's got
coming down
people
the pipe.
everywhere at this point in San Francisco.
Not only that, something that he was worried about coming back out that had happened a few years ago that he'd been able to keep under wraps. He was worried. He had been arrested in 1973 in a Los Angeles theater there was an undercover police officer at this movie theater during a showing supposedly of Dirty Harry. Now, why would a police officer hang out in a theater showing Dirty Harry and hoping for someone to solicit him sexually? Was this a porn movie called Dirty Harry?
Right.
That's what I was wondering. Because, a police officer would hang out at like a sex movie theater.
Right, probably.
Or a pornography movie theater. They had those in San Francisco downtown. And if it was Dirty Harry, the actual movie with Clint Eastwood, then it just had me wondering, because the way that it went down was, I guess, supposedly Jim Jones was in this movie theater watching Dirty Harry.
It was actually Harry and Dirty, I think it was.
Yeah. He supposedly made a motion to this undercover male police officer who was sitting in the theater to come to the bathroom. And so when the police officer made his way into the bathroom, Jim Jones was standing there masturbating, saying, "Do you feel lucky, punk?" Well, do you?
Nice.
No, I don't know if he said that, but that's what happened.
Right.
And he was then arrested, and he was able to keep that whole thing under wraps. It didn't get out to the public, but I'm sure with the new pressure of what's really going on in the People's Temple Church, he was probably worried that was going to resurface and it was going to really hurt his cause. I
don't know why. I feel like his members would have been like, yeah.
Yeah, he tried to fuck me in the ass too.
That guy was lucky. I mean, I wish I could get chosen by the Father.
Yeah, or that, yeah. So Jones, knowing the end is near in San Francisco and probably in the U.S., he's worn out his welcome a little bit here from Indiana to San Francisco. He's traveled all around the country. A lot of people know who he is, and if this gets out publicly, it could ruin him. And I think at this point, he was just trying to protect what he had. He had a huge following. He didn't want to lose that, and he was worried that if these news stories
there was one article in particular that mentioned a lot of the beatings
inside People's Temple, and you can still look this one up, and it went in depth. It was great journalism. They talked to this writer, I forget who it was, talked to a lot of people, defectors, people within the church, and had a lot of evidence to support what he was saying about the church. And I mean, we forgot to mention, but Jim Pryor had fake assassinations that he had made happen, and the people in the People's Council, he was worried about these defectors because these weren't your average follower of Jim Jones that were in the church and going to these things, and these were people that he had given secrets to, he had told them how his plants, and they were plants in his audiences, and they had been part of his fake assassination attempts. He had on one occasion in a parking lot, the church was going on, and he'd walked out, and the whole crowd heard like gunshots go off in the parking lot, and he was collapsed, and he had covered himself in some sort of fake blood, and he had someone run off in the woods that was one of his PC members or whatever. And he said, "Don't worry, I let him go. I knew where he was, but I let him go out of the goodness of my heart," or whatever. And so he's like dying, right? And crawls off and like has people help him into his private sector of the church or whatever. Yeah. And then he comes and they're like, so the whole audience they hear, "We're going on with our regular scheduled nightly service tonight at 5:30 or whatever," and they're like, "Oh, this is where they're going to announce that our leader has died. That it's going to be tonight that we hear," and they're all just distraught. And then he comes strolling in, totally fine.
It's another Jim Jones miracle.
It's a miracle that even my enemies, all my many enemies, can't take me out.
Yeah.
And the fear during this time, because he knows it's all coming to an end. This article is going to be put out. His informants had told him that this article is not looking good.
Yeah.
He knew it was coming, and so he knew that things needed to start happening. And one thing he had done is gone. He'd been looking for an ultimate solution, a promised land somewhere outside of the U.S. that was safe from nuclear
and
bombs.
Pressure was mounting too, because this article was getting ready to be released.
Right.
And he was like sending out people like all over the city to buy up all of the newspaper articles, but it wasn't going to be enough to stop this from getting out. So like he's literally on a schedule here. Like he needs to get out of town soon before things blow up.
But I guess we're doing this wrong. Chronologically, because that's ultimately he took off, but he couldn't have took off to Guyana without it had already been set up. I mean, years prior, he had been working on this potential commune set up in Guyana. So let's get to that.
Oh, but all he needed was the okay. It's not like anything was being done there.
Yes, there was. There had been work for years. He'd had followers down there working, because this is jungle. This is raw jungle down in Guyana.
Yeah, but I mean, they're just like cutting through trails. They're not like freaking. They're not really doing a whole lot of land clearing. They didn't do that till they got there.
No,
when they walked into Guyana, it was just a jungle. It was just like a trail that they had made to get out to this property. That was it.
No, I mean the original people. So in 1974, this is years before where we're at now. In 1974, Jones had flown down to Guyana to make a deal with the government officials in Guyana. They decided this was a good spot because of a lot of factors. They had concluded that Guyana, an English-speaking country, a socialist-leaning country, they would formerly been backed by by Great Britain.
I got you.
And they had fallen off from that whole thing with Great Britain, and they were kind of like in this transitional period where they'd gone from communist to socialist. Their leaders were like leaning socialist. They were a predominantly indigenous population, and the government included prominent black leaders. And this would afford the Black Temple members a peaceful place to live. And they thought maybe they could get land down there pretty cheap in the jungle because there's a lot of uninhabited space down there. So he flew down there. He met with people, some leaders of the government down there, and it worked out in multiple ways. It worked out for Guyana in that they had a weird thing going on where they didn't have the protection of Britain anymore. And Venezuela had a much more powerful army, and there was this part of Guyana in the Northwest District that was disputed. The border there was disputed.
Right.
Venezuela thought that was their land. Guyana said it was their land. Guyana had it for a long time, and they were backed by Britain, so Venezuela wasn't going to test it.
Gotcha.
But now Venezuela knew that Guyana was weak. Their army couldn't stop them from taking that. So along comes Jim Jones.
Yeah.
They have this chance to put a commune of American citizens on that border that Venezuela was going to take, and that would be a protection for them to not lose that land. So it was perfect for them. It was perfect timing. They're like, oh,
they're not going to fuck with these Americans.
Right? None of those Venezuelans are going to come in and kill Americans. They know what'll happen if that happens. So they agree. They end up settling a deal that would lease over 3,800 acres of jungle and land located 150 miles west of the Guyanese capital of Georgetown. And Guyana is obviously in South America, if you didn't know.
Right.
The site was isolated, had soil of low fertility, even by Guyanese standards. The nearest body of water from this part of land was 7 miles away by muddy roads. This location stood not far away from Guyana's disputed border with Venezuela, which we talked about. So it was a nice little buffer zone for Guyana to not lose that land from Venezuela.
Absolutely.
And so
he
had made this deal years before what we're talking about, where he was still doing well in San Francisco.
Because 74 is actually when he got to San Francisco.
Right. He was thinking ahead. He was thinking about the ultimate prize. And so what I've said, he had sent down like a handful of people in shortly after the deal was made to just start working on that raw jungle.
Gotcha.
And so, there was still a lot of work to be done when the people...
So maybe that's what I was thinking of. When those people first arrived, I mean, it was still
very
pretty raw jungle.
Yeah, it wasn't quite what he had told them, because he had been leading up to this point where shit hit the fan in San Francisco. He'd been slowly kind of indoctrinating their minds with the idea of going somewhere else. Like this wasn't the ultimate. There's a promised land that I have bought land down somewhere. And he eventually told him it was in Guyana. And then he started making trips down there and seeing the progress that was done by his people that he'd selected to go down there.
Right.
And the people said that this was the golden era for them. The early people that he sent down there loved it because there was no presence of Jim down there. They were working, sure, but they were like having a great time down there, just hanging out. There's camaraderie, a great sense of accomplishment for that group that was early on working out there by themselves.
Yeah.
And he was sending plenty of stuff down there, food and all that stuff. So they had everything they needed. And they were slowly over the years.
I think there was only like 20 of them or something like that.
They spent about almost 3 years and he would send a little bit more and a little bit more. Eventually, it
Right.
got to there was 20 or 30 people that were down there working on this raw jungle and turning it into a somewhat habitable place and trying to work on learning what grows, what doesn't grow in that soil, how to. Eventually, they wanted to become self-sustainable for as many people as Jones brought down there, and he was thinking it would probably be around 500-600 people. Obviously, it ended up being a lot more.
Yeah.
So that kind of sets up the move there, but it was prompted. Ultimately, he didn't think that Jonestown was ready, and it wasn't ready yet. He was still needed another year or two of progress. But when this article from whatever paper it was in San Francisco, this prominent article was going to come out, it was going to make him look terrible.
Right.
He was going to lose a lot of his followers.
Oh, God, yeah.
So that night, when he heard that article was coming out and heard what was in it, pretty much that night, people that were close to him said that we're leaving tonight. He was on the phone with someone hearing what was on that article. He's like, we're leaving tonight. So he had to keep them in the dark on all this stuff that he had done.
But one of his tactics were he would, like you said, he would implement these little hints throughout these sermons, just constantly like, oh, we need to leave. We need to find our own place. We need to,
one tactic he would use,
socialism.
One fear tactic he would use is that he would say, because the whole Watergate thing was going on, Nixon was president, and a lot of he was convincing everyone that Nixon was going to install martial law, that the army was going to patrol the population, and that black people were going to be put into concentration camps. That's what he was telling them. He was putting this kind of fear in them, and if it wasn't nuclear attacks, it was going to be complete martial law, and
he was talking like Nazi
all minorities
Germany.
were going to be thrown in prison. Like Nazi Germany. Like Gestapo stuff was going to be happening.
Which is interesting because later on he ended up using some of Hitler's techniques in controlling his own people.
That's something I forgot to bring up. When he was a kid, he studied Hitler like extensively, was obsessed.
really?
And he would actually have his friends do goose step and stuff for him. It was very creepy. Yeah.
That is extremely creepy. How did you forget that?
I know, right? Kind of says something about his psyche a little bit, you think?
Yeah, really.
Wanted to be, I mean, he was a great public speaker like Hitler was.
Yeah,
You're going to say anything positive about him is that he was a great speaker in public. You know, some of the worst people were, I guess.
Yeah, very passionate.
So the night that Jim took his congregation and fled to Guyana was August 1st, 1977, just before that article came out. And he would end up taking, ultimately the population down there was going to be about 1,000 people, which is just crazy. And the camp was not ready for it.
Oh God, no.
Right.
They were doing well with 20 to 30 people.
Yeah,
everybody was fine, but to feed that many people that fast.
Yeah, the housing wasn't ready. It was a sudden increase in population that they weren't ready for, and as a result, the inhabitants had to work extra hours, cut rations to accommodate the newcomers. Undernourished, many fell to tropical diseases that the temple's doctors couldn't either identify or treat properly. I mean, there's stuff that you're just going to run into in a jungle in Guyana that you're not going to be ready for. You know what I mean?
Guyana is giving. Jonestown is giving some of their surplus stuff to Georgetown.
Yeah,
the local, because they're kind of partnered with them, so they kind of have to give a certain amount of their food, supplies.
You're 100% right. They were supposed to grow a certain amount of stuff, and like 10% of the yields were supposed to go back to the Guyanese population.
So that made it even more difficult,
right,
to supplement this many people.
And among the sick was Jones himself. A lot of people say that he just once down in Guyana, everything changed. First of all, the people that were already there, I talked about his presence not being there was a good thing. Yeah. Everyone that lived in Guyana said that when Jones was there, it was a different thing.
It's like a dark cloud over the whole place.
Yeah, it was much more get back to work, very Nazi run-esque. It was like work all day long.
Don't say anything bad about the temple.
Yep.
Someone will turn you in. There were like kids turning in their parents.
Yep.
They heard them say something.
Yeah, and everybody's living kind of in squalor. I mean, the place looks beautiful. I have to say that. I'm sure a lot of people loved it there. I really am. When I watched the documentary, I saw a lot of genuine people that seem to love it down there, and I can see why. Yeah. It was like a place for them. You know what I mean? Everybody got along. They all lived together, and if you have your family members and stuff there, you probably would love it. But they didn't have much. I mean, they were living in bunks. It was like bunk beds, and
triple bunk beds.
Yeah, triple bunk beds. No air conditioning except for an old Jimmy's. Jimmy's section.
Jim's suite had his own air conditioning.
He had a suite with a refrigerator with sweet soda drinks, drugs.
Yeah, he had it made.
Yeah, and so this is this to me sounds like its own form of hell. 24/7. Probably the most advanced thing that Jonestown had was its speaker system.
Oh God!
This place was rigged with speakers everywhere.
Yeah,
like you would have
loud speakers like
you would have at a football game.
Yep.
And he is on this fucking microphone radio thing that's going through those speakers 24/7, rambling. And you can see the people that lived in Jonestown that are alive to this day talk about it, and they roll their eyes when this thing is mentioned. They got so sick of hearing him fucking ramble, and he's drunk or high on some kind of tranquilizer or whatever he is, slurring. They said that they could hear the progression in slurring in his words. Yeah. The longer they were there, the longer he was there, the more like he was almost incoherent.
Even when he passed out, he would just play recordings of himself. Like I said earlier. So like you never got a break.
Dude, honestly, Jonestown almost sounded to me like, if you've read the book 1984.
I have not, no.
By George Orwell, it's almost Orwellian, this town. He's like, it's like everyone expected to turn each other in.
Yeah.
Them constantly having their ears pounded with the message of the leader.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's very 1984. And obviously you were not welcome to leave. He tried to convince the outside world that anyone is welcome to leave whenever they wanted.
Oh yeah.
But no one was allowed to leave. No. If you watch the documentary,
you were punished in secret.
He recorded all of his sermons even down in Jonestown, and you can go back and listen to some of them. There was one where, leading up to Christmas, a woman had turned in an older man that wanted to leave. He had told her, "I'm getting out of here by Christmas time.
Yeah.
I want to see my family," and she turned him into Jones. And Jones, during one of his sermons, is recorded calling this guy out, saying, he asked her, "What did he say?" And she said, "He said he wanted to leave by Christmas." And he said, "You want to leave by Christmas? You want to get out of here by Christmas?"
Yeah.
You can leave I can make means, but it ain't gonna be on a flight.
Yeah.
And he said, "Sit back down and shut up." Like, just completely
get out of my face with that.
And he had the backing of his crowd. I mean, even if a lot of these people, it's very, like I said, 1984, a lot of people were afraid to admit how they really felt. And it was much easier to just be a part of the crowd, because you didn't want to be that person picked out of a crowd that got singled out by Jones and made an example of. You know what I mean?
There's a lot of people that are still in Scientology because of that too. Like you talked about.
They're afraid to defect because of what might happen. I mean, he would scare you, and that he said that the angel of death couldn't protect you if you were leaving. He would threaten you in a way that he made it sound like something was just going to happen to you, but you kind of sensed that he meant that he would make something happen to you.
Oh yeah.
Oh, the angel of death can't protect you if you leave the church.
Yeah.
Basically, his way of saying, I'll have someone kill you.
Yeah. Real quick before we get too far from the whole loudspeaker thing, we need to talk about like the messages he was spreading on these loudspeakers, because that's like the creepiest thing,
right?
Because these people
propaganda that he was spreading.
They had no access to radio, TV,
no newspapers,
no
outside world. They're living in the jungle.
Yep. So the only outside world connection they were getting was from him, and so he could tell them whatever he wanted. He could tell them that
all the stuff that he said was going to happen is happening. In the
it's
US.
all happening. He's like, be glad that you're here. Be glad that you're not there, because if you were, you'd be dead or attacked, and your loved ones are gone.
And so these people that are living there are writing. They're allowed to write to their family, but there is several layers of defense before those letters get to them and before those letters get to their family.
The letters would even be edited.
Oh, 100%.
The letters would be
they had to be submitted to one of his underlings, who would then give them advice on how to rewrite it, because they can't say this certain stuff. Anything that makes the town look bad, Jonestown look bad, they have to take that out. It has to be just all about how great Jonestown is and how much they love it there.
And he intercepted the letters coming in too. So people were like, "Oh, my loved ones aren't writing to me," and he would tell them, your loved ones are dead, or they forgot about you, and you're working for the cause now anyway. Like, don't worry about them.
Yep.
So creepy, man. Yeah. But like loved ones would get letters, and they'd be like, "This is not even what they call me."
Right.
Like, like a son would get a letter from his mother, who always called him like a pet name or something, and then she would call him like his real name, his full name.
Right.
And he was like, "Well, this is strange. My mother doesn't call me this, and she doesn't talk like this either." Mm-hmm. And then there would be even words crossed out and corrected in spelling with someone else's handwriting.
Right.
Like how blatant, obvious.
The family members in the U.S. knew that this wasn't their loved one talking. This was Jim Jones talking.
Yeah.
And so that's when things start unfolding, even for Jonestown. Everywhere he goes, it's a matter of time, because he's just pulling antics that ultimately they're not going to work long term, because he's not being honest. He's being deceitful to large amounts of people, and it's defectors are going to happen.
Yeah.
And so some stuff that came back to bite him was, there's all these family members that just don't believe that their family members in Guyana and in Jonestown really, they family members in the U.S. think that their family members are being held against their will, that they're not allowed to leave, and they're right. and they start writing into the Congress, and a newly installed, a new congressman in California who was a man of action, Leo Ryan, a very respectable, very
hands-on,
admirable guy
Yeah.
who like would hit the ground and actually make stuff happen, like a very rare congressman.
He actually put himself in prison for a week just to see what prison life was like to improve it for prisoners. Like very hands-on dude, like not afraid.
Yeah.
Roll up his sleeves.
And so he gets newly installed. He gets voted in and becomes a congressman in California right around this time. And one thing, even leading up to becoming a congressman, he was aware of what was going on in Guyana. And once he became congressman, he promised to make something happen because he was getting so many letters from family members in the U.S. Saying that they have family members down there and they don't think that what's going on down there is good.
Right.
And he wanted to get to the bottom of it. And so when he that was one of his first orders of business in his new position, was to find out what was going on down there. And he starts reaching out to people in Jonestown saying he wants to make a visit down there with some people and just take a look around and see what kind of practices are going on down there.
Absolutely.
And so he starts reaching out, and obviously Jim Jones takes this as a big threat.
Oh yeah.
You know, he couldn't just put on an act for a little while we were there. Ultimately, if Jim would have just allowed people to come and go if they wanted and created what he was saying he had made, everything would have been great. I know. It ultimately came down to him wanting ultimate power. If he could have had plenty of power, being honest.
But don't you think he's in too deep once he got to Guyana? He was already in too deep. If he
could have turned his ways
If he
around.
didn't have complete control, but why would he do it now?
Right.
If he was getting away with it in the U.S., why would he change it now?
Right.
I mean, you're talking about a guy that's driven by these psychopathic tendencies, man. His obsessions. He's not going to get.
Yeah, there's a lot of ifs and buts, but he was who he was. And it was a matter. He was a ticking time bomb. He was a guy that needed ultimate power, and one person leaving was unacceptable to him.
Yeah.
We look at it from the big picture of like, one person leaves, big deal. You got 1,000 people here.
That person's not under his spell anymore.
Yeah.
That person's not under his spell because they could criminate him in all sorts of ways. Mm-hmm. Even though he supposedly kept all these documents signed by people.
Very Scientology-esque, things that he could hold over people.
Yeah.
Children he held over people, which came back to bite him. So Timothy and Grace Stone, we talked about them, his former lawyer. They were living in the U.S. They had defected from his church, but their son, John Victor, was still in the church because he was a member of the church. He was a baby born to this socialist society.
This was a can of worms.
Right. So
shit.
This is a big problem for Jim Jones because Tim is a guy, talk about a man of action. He is a guy who has vast knowledge of the judicial system, a vast knowledge of the way the laws work. And he goes and talks to a federal judge and says that they file a thing saying they want custody of their child that's being held against his will in Guyana.
Right.
And this federal judge orders Jim Jones to make an appearance in U.S. in California with John Victor, and of course Jim Jones not showing up, and they set several of these dates that Jim Jones doesn't show up for. Congressman Ryan is aware of this as well.
Yep.
And they start to make this big petition signed by all these family members.
Yeah.
And this hits the doorstep of Congressman Ryan, so he really doesn't have much of a choice. I mean, the people are doing a good job of pleading their case.
Yeah, they are.
To get to the bottom of what's going on in Jonestown.
Right.
And so he sets a date to come down to Guyana, and there's a lot of stalling done on Jim Jones's people's part.
Yeah,
they're really resistant to it, and but it's not much they can do. This is the U.S. government that's making this happen. Now Jim at this time goes to his backup plan, something that he'd always kind of slipped. You talked about subliminally slipping in messages to his crowds. Yep. You can go back to the beginning of his earliest sermons, and here and there he would always talk about laying your life down for the cause of socialism.
Liberty, give me debt, or give me death. He liked to use that too.
Yep. He would slip in little messages about I'd rather die living our way and send a message to the system that it's not fair to live under your reign of terror or whatever, that we'd rather die for the cause. He always kind of slipped that in there.
Oh yeah, and he would gauge the crowd too, and he would have people looking and looking at people's countenances.
We forgot to mention
how they changed.
We forgot to mention that during the Redwood Valley days, during his days of his PC group, he had done a test on them, where he had given the members of the PC, I don't know how many people were in it, not that many, he had given them all a drink of Kool-Aid and told them after they had already drank it that he had poisoned them and that they were going to be dead in 45 minutes, and just to gauge their reaction. And most of them, for the most part, were accepting of it, which is what he wanted.
Yeah,
it was perfect. And so his backup plan for this congressman coming down, if things went bad and a lot of people tried to defect, that it was that he was going to end it for everyone for the name of socialism. And he was
That's
hoping
right.
that everyone would lay down their lives for him and his cause. And so he had had one of his people order 1 pound of sodium cyanide, which is enough for 1,800 lethal doses. And the cost of this was $8.85.
Whoa, that's cheap.
That boggled my mind. For $8.85, you can easily kill 1,800 people.
In the 70s.
In the 70s. And so he had one of his closest companions in Jonestown start mixing this cyanide and testing it in different drinks to make it to where it was, more easy to take in, a little easier to drink, not so bitter because it was supposedly very bitter.
Yeah, I heard that his doctor at this time so he worked 6 days a week on healing people, and then on Wednesdays he was not allowed to heal anyone. He was only supposed to be working on the poison.
Jesus Christ!
So
that's a walking contradiction right there.
Right?
That's Jim Jones in a nutshell.
Yeah,
telling you one thing, doing the opposite. You know?
That's literally what this doctor's schedule was. Every Wednesday he had to work on the poison to get it just perfect, where it would kill with not as much pain, and he was doing research and whatnot. But 6 days a week he's out there trying to do his best.
Right. And so I believe Congressman Ryan had flown down one time and gotten turned away by the Guyanese Republic or their government. And then upon talking to them further and saying there's no other way, we're coming down there. Because they did kind of try to protect Jim a few times from the U.S. No, not just Georgetown, but the Guyanese.
Oh, yeah.
Just their officials, their government officials tried to create a buffer.
Like we said earlier, they benefited from them being there. They got
they
got crops, they got supplies, they got a border between them and Venezuela. So it was kind of a big deal.
Yeah, and also I think it's important to bring up that Jim had also kind of been speaking to them. He would gather them all together at nights under this big canopy they had in the camp, and he would do sermons every night, just like always. And some of the things he was throwing in there was potentially moving to the Soviet Union, moving to Russia.
Yep.
Because they were a communist country and they kind of fit their views, and that could be a safe haven for them eventually if things went wrong there. So that's just kind of a little snippet I thought I'd throw in. But California Congressman Leo Ryan was not going to give up that easy. He made plans to come back again, finally got Jim Jones to approve like a one-day meeting or whatever. He wanted a couple days, but Jim agreed to you can see what you need to see in a few hours or whatever.
Right.
And so he flew Congressman Leo along with some members of the media. He had some cameramen.
Oh yeah.
People from like
reporters,
reporters from large news outlets, and some of the family members of people in Jonestown come down with him. Mm-hmm. And that was on November 17th, 1978. And after some brief stalling in Georgetown, they were finally. I guess Jim said that some of the members of the other families or whatever weren't allowed to come, and so it was basically. Leo Ryan, along with his cameramen and news reporters, they were allowed into Jonestown, and he greeted them warmly. And the place, by all initial reports from the people that were there, say that it was a great. It looked amazing.
Their responses seemed so practiced.
The people that were there,
yeah. Their responses just seemed so practiced. The footage that they got,
right.
It's just,
love it here. We love it here. We totally don't want to, wink, don't want to leave.
18 hours a day. I love eating rice.
I love wiping my ass with palm leaves. It's fantastic.
I love sleeping 4 people to a twin bed.
Right. I love getting 2 nuggets of chicken per night. The cost. That's one thing we didn't mention was that this was supposed to be a totally self-sustainable camp, right?
Right.
It was supposed to they were supposed to eat what they grew, and eventually, obviously, it wouldn't happen overnight. But over the years, they were supposed to get to the point where they didn't need money to live there. It was but it really started cutting into Jim Jones's money. Like his offshore accounts started getting chewed up because their overhead, although they were able to take it from like initially it costed like $600,000 a month to run this place. Like, believe it or not, that's all. They had 1,000 people that were living there. They had to feed them 3 meals a day. They had endless stuff that you just wouldn't think of. They had incubators for babies. They had a lot of stuff that they had to think about.
Right.
And so they got it down to where obviously the place was started to become self-sufficient, but they still, the best they could do, even with bringing in indigenous people and like creating like a nightclub environment. They tried doing stuff like that. They started like almost running business, become like a capitalistic thing where they were like, they had like dance clubs that they had created there.
Ironic.
They started to bring in some income from that, but the best they could do was get to where it was still costing him $100,000 a month to run this place. He was in the negative $100,000 a month, and they estimated that he could maybe last like another 20 years before they would go bankrupt at this camp. So he saw that it really,
It's actually not too bad.
right? I mean, because he had supposedly anywhere from $10 to $30 million in offshore accounts that he could tap into and keep going back to cover the cost of this place.
Oh, wow.
But he's doing more drugs and all that stuff, and that's cutting into it even more, I'm sure.
Oh, for sure. Because he's buying it in bulk. It's not like he can go to the dispensary.
Right. It's a lot cheaper to spend $8 and just kill everybody.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Oh, God. Yeah.
Sorry, that sounds pretty morbid.
That was
So Congressman Ryan gets there. They end up, obviously Jim Jones puts on a big show. He has a big event scheduled that night where they play live music, and you can watch footage of this, and it's heartbreaking because everyone is dancing and having a great time. And legitimately, they were having a great time.
There were some
that night.
amazing musicians there. God,
Right.
Their music was amazing.
Yeah.
It really was.
No doubt. They had like a little Michael Jackson up on stage singing. It was
man.
fucking incredible.
They killed it.
Yeah, and so Congressman Ryan at one point gets up on stage after the music's being performed, grabs the microphone and says, I got to admit, I came down here to see what was really going on with this camp. I had some suspicions.
Yeah.
And by most accounts, when I talk to you guys, you seem like this is the greatest thing that's ever happened to you. And the crowd erupts.
They cheered for like 10 minutes.
It was
ridiculous.
It was making him uncomfortable how long they cheered for. He would try to start talking again, and then they would get louder again.
Yeah.
And it was like them sending a message to him like, fuck you, we are happy here.
Yep.
Type of thing.
It was incredibly loud.
Yeah.
Jim Jones just standing over there, just smirking, just like watching.
Very
everything.
creepy image in the documentary that I actually had to pause on and really like stare at for a minute. The documentary did an amazing, I guess not the documentary, but the
This was the actual
camera,
footage.
the cameraman that was down there that probably ended up dead. I think cameraman died. That night during that whole event, when Congressman Ryan is on the stage, there's an image of him with the microphone, and the camera kind of put him to the right of the screen, and on the left side of the screen was a sign that was up. That Jim Jones had put up that said that old quote about how history is doomed to repeat itself if you don't change or whatever.
Yeah.
There's Congressman Ryan standing there with that sign in the background.
Those who don't know history are damned to repeat it or something like that.
And it's very eerie knowing that the next day Congressman Ryan was going to be killed.
Right.
And almost everybody in that tent was going to be dead. Pretty much everybody.
Wow.
Very eerie watching that footage of everyone dancing and having a great time, and kids being white ladies holding little black kids and black ladies holding little white kids, and just a beautiful display of just everyone getting along.
Togetherness.
Just a peaceful, beautiful thing that maybe
he just brought them
just wish
together
it could have
in fear.
worked out. You wish it could have worked out. And the people that survived later said that it was their own little version of heaven that kind of turned into hell eventually. You know what I mean? Like initially, there was days where when they first got there, they were just like, "This is everything that I ever wanted something to be."
Wow.
And then it all went wrong. So yeah, Congressman Ryan gets up there and has his speech, and that whole night seemed to have gone great, except one guy tried to come up and slip a note to one of the staff members or one of the cameramen or something from the
it was
media
one of the
crew.
cameramen. Yeah.
One of the cameramen had a guy come up to him and try to hand him a note. He tried to like slip it between the guy's arm and the crook of his arm, and the cameraman didn't know what was going on. It fell on the floor. He then picked it back up and handed it to him, said, "You dropped this."
Yeah.
Observed by a 9-year-old kid,
Yep.
who then started screaming. He handed him a note. Very Orwellian moment where the kid rats on the adult. And Jim, like with his glasses that came in handy, was just, I think there's even an image of him sitting there at the table that night where everyone's looking at something and his head is facing that way, but his eyes are looking the other way.
Yeah.
Like he's watching everyone near all of the people, the Congressman Ryan's people. He's keeping an eye on anyone that goes near them because he's just waiting for them to try this note passing moment.
Right.
And so the note was obviously, me, my wife, and daughter want to get out of here. Help us.
Right. Help us leave Jonestown.
Help us leave. And so Congressman Ryan and his people decide that they're going to stay the night. And then in the morning, the whole plan was to interview a group of people that they had suspected might be wanting to get out of there, but were too afraid to say. They had a list of people after talking to all the family members in the U.S. of people that they suspected may not want to be there. And so they were going to do all these interviews with Jim Jones's approval in the morning. The morning comes, it's a beautiful morning, and they start conducting these interviews, and then out of nowhere, this storm hits.
Right.
The storm that they hadn't had a storm this bad since the initial construction of Jonestown.
Oh, yeah, like a monsoon.
Just a monsoon where everyone's trying to like hold up the tent tops because it's raining
Yeah.
so hard. Inches of rain are coming down, and people that were there that survived this whole thing said it felt like darkness rolling through. Like they could sense that morning was something was going to go wrong because they knew that people were going to the reporters, and in these interviews they were going to say things that Jim Jones didn't want them to say, and that they were going to try and leave, and Jim Jones was going to try and prevent them from leaving. And they had known that in the past he had said things about laying down their lives.
Yeah.
And
I think they knew those reporters weren't getting out, even if they had the information they needed to shut Jonestown down.
Right.
Those reporters weren't.
And some people in Jonestown might have even known, the more savvy ones might have even known that this thing could end badly for everybody.
Oh yeah, they were preparing for it.
Yeah. So it's pouring rain, and there's this weird period of time where everybody's huddled under these tents, and a certain group of people have come to the reporters and told them and Congressman Ryan that they want to defect, that they want out. And Congressman Ryan agrees that he's going to fly these people out. It's not that many.
No.
What's crazy is from from Jim Jones's perspective, he could have really looked pretty good had he just played along with this whole thing and been cool about it. Like, what was it about? 16, 17 people that initially had gone and said that they wanted defective.
Maybe if that.
Out of over 900 people, close to 1,000 people, 16 people. Those could just be people like the kid when you have a sleepover and everything's great. We're ordered pizza, we're watching movies. They just want to go home.
Yeah,
there's those people. I was that kid.
I would just rather be home.
I was that kid that would call my mom. I just want to be home.
Yeah.
I was that little kid that everybody hated. They would cry and want to go home. That was me.
It.
I know. Now you guys know.
It's the last
who I
time
really
Lorne
am.
stays the night here.
Right. I just liked home because I could do whatever. My mom let me do whatever I want. I could stay up late. I could eat whatever was in the fridge.
Like, you go to bed at 10?
Right.
What a bitch.
I was always worried about what time everybody was going to go to bed. This could have been those people. There was said that it was less than 2% of the population of that town. And from a news, how could a news outlet even make them look bad if that was the percentage of people that led? You could have, I mean, ultimately Jim Jones could have put out a statement that said 96% of the people in my, or whatever it was, 98% of the people in Jonestown didn't want to leave. They had the choice and they didn't.
But here's the thing: how many people wanted to leave but were too afraid to
Doesn't
say
matter.
something?
It doesn't matter though. From his perspective, his argument could have been 98% of people had the choice and they didn't leave, even though they were afraid to say the popular, like people in America wouldn't know that.
Okay.
Their voices wouldn't be heard.
But what does he do when more people want to leave? They say, "Hey, well, you let them leave. Why can't we leave?"
Unfortunately, that was his outlook. He was one of his advisors later said that they went up to him and said, it's only 16 or 20 people, and he said if it's 20 today, it's going to be 60 tomorrow.
Yeah.
They're just going to keep taking more people, and this whole thing's going to fall apart.
Yep.
And so the rain finally clears up, and there's kind of like a lot of commotion because one guy wants to take his kids, and there's a woman that's there that doesn't want her kids taken, and there's screaming and fighting going on.
It's a rough scene.
And it's this you're watching you can see footage of Jim during this. He's trying to convince people under the tent, like, why do you want to leave? He's trying to talk them out of it. And you could visibly see him getting just so angry,
flustered. Yeah,
just so angry. I could see his blood boiling. Yeah, I could see his blood boiling because they're questioning his power, and things are starting to unravel. And he's always had his thumb over the top of everyone and covered every possible outlet for people to escape. And now they're escaping anyway.
Yep.
And like questioning his greatness and whatnot. And there's people actually coming up. Some of the defectors are telling Congressman Ryan, like, we need to go now. This is not safe for you. And he's saying, we got nothing to worry about. We've got the cover of Congress. We've got the U.S. government behind us. There's no one here is going to harm us. And this guy's looking at him like, you're fucking stupid. Yeah. You are in the middle of the jungle in Guyana with a cult leader who wants to kill everyone.
These people do not
I don't think they care.
if they live.
Right.
You don't understand.
And under the tent, as they're about to leave, Congressman Ryan has gathered these people that are going to defect, less than 20, between 15 and 20, I think it was 16 or 17 people, are going to defect. And a guy comes up to Congressman Ryan and puts a knife to his throat and says, you're going to die, motherfucker, and attempts to cut him before he is stopped by the defectors, stopped by Congressman Ryan's security, and thrown back. And then that's at the point where Congressman Ryan realizes, okay, this
I need to get the fuck out of here.
A knife to my throat. Maybe that guy wasn't kidding. We need to go. And so they start to gather up, and they have this big truck that's going to get them out. Of course, the truck gets stuck in the mud because it's been raining.
Right.
And all this tension is building up. All the people are just a walk away. In Jonestown, they're worried maybe they're going to gather up a militia and come after them.
Yeah.
They make their way to this airstrip where 2 planes are supposed to come and pick up these people. They had to call in a new plane because they had one that wasn't enough for as many defectors as they, thought would be coming.
Right.
So they have a little bit more people that they're trying to get out of there. They get to the airstrip and no planes are there.
Yeah.
And so they're sitting ducks.
Right.
You got to think that they're pretty worried at this point. And then they see this truck pull up with people from Jonestown in it.
Well, the plane does eventually show up first.
The plane shows up, but there's this truck that's been sitting over there watching them.
Yeah.
The plane pulls up. They're about to board the plane.
Mm-hmm.
This truck comes pulling up. There's people that get out and they walk around, kind of like observing everybody getting on the plane. And they get back in the truck and they're thinking, that's weird. And then up pops from the bed. It was like a dump truck.
Right.
Pops people with machine guns and start opening fire on Congressman Ryan. All of these news reporters, the cameramen, everyone gets shot at.
A few people took cover behind the wheels of the plane. I mean, that's literally all they had was the landing gear to hide behind.
Right.
I mean, that's it.
And we forgot to mention that at the last second, when Congressman Ryan was loading those 16 people back at Jonestown, one guy had jumped in the truck last second, a guy by the name of Larry Layton, who all of the defectors that really wanted to leave were very suspicious of why Larry Layton was last second jump in, because they knew Larry Layton to be one of the most passionate followers of Jim Jones, a guy that was probably the last guy they ever suspected would leave Jim Jones' side. He would do anything for Jim, anything Jim asked. And so they immediately thought, this guy is going to try something.
Right.
He jumped in here to kill us. That's why he's here. So that when they first got there to the airstrip, everybody was patted down. They couldn't find anything on Larry Layton. They thought, oh, well, he must have had a change of heart and he really wants to leave.
Right.
But when these guys show up with guns, there was some people that had made it on the plane. The guys in the truck started opening up on the people outside, and Larry Layton is inside the plane and starts shooting people who are inside the plane with him. He ends up injuring 2 people in the plane before he's finally taken out and incapacitated by one of the other defectors. And so he would end up initially by the Guyanese officials being charged with some charges. They couldn't get him for murder because he didn't actually kill anyone. Right. But he would be later on one of the people that would be captured
assault with a deadly
for
weapon
part of this thing. Because obviously the people that pulled up in the truck and opened fire on everybody, they went back to Jonestown and started talking about how they had killed they had killed Congressman Ryan, mission success. Obviously Jim Jones had set this whole thing up. And he starts telling the crowd back there that, Congressman Ryan's dead, which we'll go into here in a second.
Which the crowd kind of knew.
Not everybody died at the airstrip. Congressman Ryan, they made sure that they killed him. He had died. Most of the media people had died, the cameramen, but some people had ran off. I think Congressman Ryan,
reporter that lived.
No, I think it was Congressman Ryan's secretary who had gone along with him.
That's right.
Had laid beside. It might have been the sound guy or something, the Asian guy that survived. They had pretended to be dead. That's the only reason they survived.
They still shot her point blank though.
Yeah,
but she just happened to survive it. I guess they shot her in the chest and
So after those guys left, they had ran off into the edge of the forest, or not forest, but the jungle, and waited out the whole night, obviously thinking they're going to come back and kill us. It's just a matter of time. So they had the longest night of their life sitting in the jungle, not knowing that back at Jonestown, all havoc had broken loose. And that those people weren't coming back because they were going to be dead themselves.
Right.
And so the assassination crew that had killed Ryan's people went back to Jonestown. Meanwhile, Jones's plan was kicking off. He got on the radio and called the whole town of Jonestown to come to their meeting place where they always met for his. And this isn't out of the normal. The pavilion. This isn't out of the normal for anyone. They expected that when Congressman Ryan left, that they were all going to have a big meeting and discuss what had gone on.
Right.
And he was going to probably try and talk about the defectors and how forget them, or all this stuff. So not everybody is alerted right away. I'm sure the more savvy people, as we discussed, were probably a little worried about his mindset now moving forward.
Yeah.
So he calls this big congregation, and he's standing on stage, and this is where the famous Jonestown audio starts.
Oh, it's so creepy.
And he starts going into a diatribe about how, I've always loved you, and I've always tried to do what's best for you. Mm-hmm. And the gist of his speech was that we just can't live in peace. And if we can't live in peace, then we're going to die in peace. Yep. And that this is going to be a message to the rest of the world, and that people will study this for years to come. And this is going to be our display of disgust to the world and the way it is. And that we all we wanted was to not be bothered down here, and they couldn't let us live down here in peace. And so now we were going to lay down our lives.
Right.
And
not many people were on board with this, really.
No.
Like once the rubber hit the road, people were like, hey, I'd rather fight.
Right.
I'd rather fight. Let's fight for what we believe in. Let's go down swinging.
He actually offers the microphone to anyone who has any
Yeah, until they start talking about that, and he's like, no, never mind. Somebody else, please.
One woman comes up and starts pleading her case, saying, "Can't we go to Russia? What happened?" He says, I'm getting on the line with Russia right now." He claims to have someone calling Russia to ask if they'll allow them to come last second.
Fake news.
But he's telling them that not only the U.S. government is coming because we killed a U.S. congressman. Obviously, they're not going to let us get away with this. This is what he wanted, though. Yep. Ultimately, he wanted an excuse to have this revolutionary suicide happen. And now, I mean, and he had a point. The U.S. was not going to let them get away with killing a congressman. They were going to come down there and they were going to fucking crack skulls for sure.
Yeah.
But he was telling them that they were going to torture the children. All the children, they were going to. No one was going to torture the children.
No.
What happened right now was the worst thing that could have happened to these children. This is what affects me so much. So people in the crowd start realizing that, okay, this suicide thing, he's not kidding. This is happening, and vats of not Kool-Aid, but Flavor Aid were brought out that had been mixed with sodium cyanide.
Yep.
And there was
syringes were brought out. And
cups presented and syringes, which is horrific to me because I always thought, what did they do with the children? I initially, without researching it, thought that they just poured the Kool-Aid down these, infants and children's throats. But they injected children with cyanide first. They tried to kill all the children first. And then the Kool-Aid was presented for the adults. And he's on stage and you can hear screaming. You can hear children crying and screaming because drinking sodium cyanide is not, he tried to convince them it was quick and easy and it's not.
No, there was cyanide at the mouth, there was seizures.
Cyanide slowly strangles you is what happens. It closes off your lungs. It is painful and it takes a long time. It takes up to 45 minutes to die. And it's slowly like someone is putting you in a chokehold and just taking your breath away.
And then there were still...
Then you start foaming at the mouth and convulsing. You fall on the ground. You start having seizures, and it's an ugly thing.
But even at this point, there were still some people who thought this was a faith test. How many people you think drank that Kool-Aid because they thought this was another damn faith test?
One of the guys that they interviewed in that documentary said that he was carrying a child, and the child died in his arms, and he said, that's when I knew it was real. Like, this isn't a test. Like, I just held a child that was dying.
Yeah, there was a story from... Two boys. They were like teenagers. One of them was like 16 and 15 or something like that. And they were actually like giggling and laughing at the way the people were flopping around the ground because they thought it was all part of the act. They'd seen this so many times, this crazy over the top, charismatic performance. They thought that this was just another one. And then Jim Jones actually saw them and called them out and was like, what's so funny? And they said, oh, well, we're just so excited to die for the cause.
Just being smart asses.
Yeah, but he took them genuinely, and then that woke them up, and then they were like, wait a minute, he can't read our minds. He's not God.
Now, we haven't mentioned that Jones's sons and a large group, the people that actually survived this for the most part, there was only 3 people that were in Jonestown that actually made it out on that day. Everyone else died. We'll get to that. But there was like a group of like 80, including his sons, that were in Georgetown that day to play basketball. They had set up their own basketball team to play against the Guyanese civilians.
Yeah.
Guyanese had their own teams, and these, Americans would play them, and they'd always lose. But they were in town that day, and his son, Stephen, he loved going to Georgetown because it was his chance to escape. They would go to the movies. So he's kind of like buying his time in Georgetown, not knowing that all this chaos is going on until he gets a call from his father. He knew that Congressman Ryan was coming that day, so he knew it'd probably be a different day than normal.
Right.
But he didn't know how bad it had gone back in Georgetown, and he receives a radio call from his father back in Jonestown. From Jonestown to Georgetown.
Right.
Where his father tells him, you're going to meet Mr. Frazier.
And that was like a code that they set up,
It meant everyone must die. And his son is trying to plead with him and say, isn't there any other way, Dad? And he's frantically trying to, at this point, figure out a way to get back to Jonestown and stop it.
Yeah.
But it's too late. He never ends up being able to make it back in time because it's a long trek through the jungle and everything to get back there.
Right.
And he's stuck in Georgetown. So his sons ended up surviving this, except for I think he had a young, one of the younger children died. A couple of his children died back in Jonestown, and his wife was completely against this whole thing. He's actually getting into an argument with her. Obviously, you can only hear him, but she's on the side of the stage pleading with him, like, we can't do this. At a certain point, he tells her that he had already talked to her sons back in Georgetown, and they were killing themselves too. So this is his way of gaining that power over her to get her to submit and do it as well, because he knew that if she knew all of her sons were dead, all of her children were dead, that she was going to lay down her life as well. And of course she did. But there's also some people say that she was held down and injected. Anyone that didn't willingly drink the Kool-Aid or the Flavor Aid was held down against their will and injected, which is horrifying to me.
Or,
children
or forced at gunpoint.
Forced at gunpoint to drink it or injected forcibly. Yep. The people that did make it out, there was one elderly lady. There was like an elderly bunker in town or in Jonestown that was like where people, like the older people were allowed to just lay there all day. They didn't have to do labor. And one lady in there, they went in and injected all these elderly people in their beds, except for one woman who they already thought was dead. So she woke up to the entire place filled with bodies. Shit. The bodies were stacked on top of each other. Mothers were on top of their babies. There was like 2 or 3 layers of bodies. That's why when in the aftermath, the Guyanese had such a miscount. They initially counted like 300 people. There was actually 909 people dead in Jonestown.
Yeah, and guards were standing like around the edge. I think like 5 people.
I think two, maybe 3 people went up to a certain guard. And said, "I don't want to die today." And one guard actually let them go. And said, "Get the hell out of here." I'm sure a lot of people got shot, probably trying to run.
Oh yeah.
And the ultimate act of cowardice, not a big surprise, Jim Jones himself was found on stage with a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. Did not drink his own Kool-Aid. Did not drink his own Kool-Aid. Killed himself. And his advisor was also, like his second in command, female advisor, was also found with a gun. So they went the easy way out. Everyone else was slowly strangled to death by their own doing.
And convulsions.
And to me,
choking.
There's so many acts of murder in this one. I think at least half the people didn't want to do this.
No way.
You know what I mean? But they felt like they had no other way
out.
Yeah. And obviously the children, you cannot tell me that anyone under the age of 18, that's not murder, because I don't think they even have the ability to make their own life decisions that severe yet. No. Like that kind of life decision to end your own life.
Yeah, you can't.
A fucking infant or like a 3-year-old, like, they just want to live. All they want to do is live and play.
All these people wanted to live in harmony. That's why they came here.
Right.
It was the whole point.
And that's the woman that got the microphone when he asked if anybody had any objections. She said that we just feel like as long as there's life, there's a chance.
Yeah.
And look at what we've done. It's been amazing. And we can continue to make progress. And
because she was thinking, well, damn, worst case scenario, they just kill you, Jim. Like, you're the leader of this shit. Like, we'll all get to live.
Right, yeah. What did we really do?
There's got to be
they'll kill the guy, or they'll do something to the guy that killed the congressman, or the people that were responsible for that.
Yeah.
And then they'll obviously take Jim Jones, but...
Yeah, I mean, everyone else, I think we're okay.
Right.
And we over here gardening, bro.
I wonder what kind of obviously I think there's probably several hundred that were willing to do this and still believed in Jim Jones and were more than happy to lay down their lives for the cause. And I'm not going to sit here and say like everybody, this was all murder. No. But the whole thing disgusted me, man. If you listen to the audio, I think it's hard to defend him at all. It really is. It's horrific.
His sermons, even back in San Francisco, when it started going off the rails, you could tell this guy just had terrible intentions from the start.
Right.
He was just obsessed with being in control of his own death, his own life, being able to choose when.
Right. And, so, like we said, 909 people died in Jonestown that day, and was a total of 918 people that were dead that day from Jones's. Between the airstrip. There was 2 or 3 people that were killed in a bathroom by one of his followers that had escaped. A guy had caught up with him. He was later charged with murder.
Some people were shot trying to escape through the jungle.
Yep.
Wow.
Thousands of written materials were found. Hundreds of recordings. He recorded all of his sermons in Jonestown, as he always did. And even the audio tape from the day of the suicide. There's all the footage from the media crew that was there the night before, which is very eerie.
Yeah, it is. Definitely
recommend you watch the documentary. Listen to if you like really creepy, eerie stuff, listen to the recording. Prepare yourself, though. It's rough. You hear kids screaming and crying because they're dying of poison.
It's so real.
And you hear the mothers crying because they're holding their babies that are dying and foaming at the mouth. It's as real as it gets. It's real audio of people, almost 1,000 people dying. Yeah, it's bad, man. And not all of them are willingly doing so.
No.
Yeah. So, that's pretty much Jonestown and Jim Jones. I don't know if you have much more. Now, if you try to go visit Jonestown, it's not so much of a tourist attraction. It's actually the jungle has completely overtaken the town. There's not much left.
I don't know if I'd want to go there, man.
The jungle's very unforgiving. I would like to go there. I think
Like to go there and walk
I want
around?
to go see the Holocaust. I want to see all this stuff as memories of just how terrible humans can be to each other. You know what I mean?
Oh, that's true. That would be kind of cool.
Just a reminder of how like history can repeat itself and be terrible, and
we hear these things, and it's easy to be
power
like,
can corrupt, and there's stories all through time of it.
yeah, it's easy to be like, oh yeah, that was a terrible time. That was a terrible person. That was a terrible thing that happened. But when you're there and you see where it happened and what happened and the effects of it,
These were real people.
it's
man.
like,
I think that's why the footage goes so far. I'm so glad those camera people, even though they died for it, they got that footage. We can see and hear, because if we just
didn't die for nothing.
If we just got the written works of what Jim Jones had done, we might sympathize with him a little bit more. But when you hear that audio, I'm telling you, it's just too
there's
hard.
no hiding from that.
No, you can't.
That's the true him.
You can hear.
Yep.
And you watch a lot of his church proceedings and his sermons as a pastor, and you're just like, yeah, you're constantly lying and contradicting yourself, and you're saying whatever you think, like whichever way the wind blows, that's what you're saying in order to gain more followers. You're not doing this because you believe in it.
Well, because he got to the point, like we talked about, where he could say anything.
Yeah.
You start to have so much confidence in yourself, and the confidence of the following of your people, that you're never wrong.
Right.
Like we talked about this even on a smaller scale with like pastors who gain grown great followings. Like, you ever try to talk to like a big pastor about anything?
No, I haven't.
Even
but he might have.
even not religion. Like it's
They're always right.
They're
right?
always right.
Yeah.
They always have an answer. They always have some smart aleck answer. Like they've been there already. They've done it.
Yep.
They know the experience. They've talked to God. God's gave them an answer.
Right.
It's just like, and then you talk to another pastor about the exact same thing. He's going to tell you something completely different. It's like, well, what God are you talking to? Mm-hmm. You know, it's just creepy that they have that much self-confidence. And it's just not good for a person's psyche, I don't think, to have that much power over people.
No, and to be surrounded by yes men all the time. You have to have people that tell you when you're doing something stupid.
Yeah.
You know,
that's right.
That disagree with you and aren't afraid to say it.
Yeah.
You know, he never had that until the very end, probably the last day when that woman stand up on stage, and she was very courageous. I wish we had her name to say it, but you can look her up. You'll hear it in the audio if you listen to it. She was the one person that was brave enough to stand up. And there was, when she made points, there was a few people that you could hear that agreed with her.
Oh yeah.
You know, even though they knew that like they were against the majority. But she said, like, I just don't think that these babies, like, I think these babies all have a chance. They deserve a chance to live.
They do.
You know, you
Everyone
could just hear the
do.
despair in her voice. Yeah. And one of the guys that made it watched his wife and son die. He watched his son die in his wife's arms, and then he watched his wife die as he told her he loved her. And the only reason he lived is because he was close to Jim in the camp, and Jim asked him to carry out suitcases filled with money and gold that they were supposed to deliver somehow to fucking Russia to help the communist cause or the socialist cause.
Yeah, right. He's going to another bank account.
Well, the dude dropped him in the jungle. He's like, he's dead. I don't need to deliver these to anybody.
Yeah.
And then he went to the Guyanese and told him where the suitcases were, and eventually they were returned to the U.S. Wow. But he, to this day, was interviewed in that and told his story of that day and how he knew.
Yeah.
He told his wife shortly before the gathering happened at the courtyard that, you know, I think we might all die here. And his
story
wife
is heartbreaking.
And his wife didn't believe him, and he could sense it. Something was not right that day.
Yeah, if you guys really get into those individual stories, the book 1,000 Lives is very interesting.
Yeah.
If you've learned all you want to know about Jim Jones and you want to hear about these people, these individual stories, they're so interesting.
It's so tragic. It's so tragic because, like we said earlier, I think these people were some of the best people that society had to offer. They were trying to make actual change on the ground level and make the world a better place. And this is what happened to them. And it's not. I think they would think it was worth it if it was remembered in the light that they wanted it to be, but it's not. It's remembered. People, the vast majority of people view them as gullible people that you killed yourself for some dumbass that convinced you to. That's not what happened, though.
No.
You know, people can be really just overtaken by another person like that, and they still mean good, but they don't realize what's happening.
Because, like we said before, he was appealing to the greatest parts of humanity.
Yeah.
He was appealing to people's consciences, their morals, and if you don't have that, you don't have anything. And if you got a guy that's saying exactly what you believe in,
and even if you saw what he really stood for over time, it was too late at that point. You couldn't get out. He had all the angles covered. He either had your kid in camp and he wouldn't let you leave with your kid because that kid was now part of the camp.
Yeah.
Or he had something over you that he could get you locked up because it had a piece of paper with your signature at the bottom. Like, it was to that extent that he had power over you, that even when you realized that it was no good and you wanted out, you couldn't get out.
Right. And there's also the case of it being a new community. You can always fall back on that excuse. You can say,
well,
people
it's a
are
work
like,
in
oh,
progress.
we're tired. We're hungry. We're tired. Well, you have to put in the work to make something.
Yep.
It
may not be even by the end of our lifetime that this happens, but we started at the ground floor and we helped it become what it will eventually become. You can,
you have to put in the work to reach paradise.
Yeah.
And that's what these people thought. They thought that they're just. And I think a lot of people who are very religious, they think that now. They work themselves to death as far as like, giving everything they have and volunteering all their time here on earth because they're waiting for that. They're waiting for that treasure that at the end of life. They're waiting for that heaven, that reward.
Right.
And not saying that that's a bad thing. Like we said before, any reason that you're a positive person, the reason doesn't really matter, I guess, as long as you're positive. But at some point, you have to take care of yourself. You have to take care of your own mind and feed your body, and you can't just run on good works alone.
Yeah. Man, I don't know what more we can say. We're 2 hours and 40 minutes of pure Jonestown.
Wow.
And I think we've talked about just about everything that I wanted to talk about, and I feel like a load's off my shoulders, man. I needed to do this episode because
I'm glad it's out there.
I am too, man. We hope you guys enjoyed it. This probably was my favorite one to study and record, and I thought it would be, but recording it has even been especially fun, just because it almost feels like you're getting off your chest.
It's like, I'm glad my feelings on this.
I'm
are
glad
out
I
there.
got this out there.
So we love Jim Jones, so
right.
No.
Yeah.
In the desert, we like a mirage. It's okay if you clicked on us because you thought we was True Crime Garage.
Back in the Christmas present.
Back in the present. Hope you guys enjoyed that.
Yeah, that was a blast from the past for us.
Mm-hmm. Well, not really. We didn't listen to it again.
No, we did. We sat here and listened to the whole 3 hours.
Yes.
Duh.
Oh, phew. So good. Really. I couldn't turn it off.
Speaking of Christmas present, if you guys haven't watched The Night Before, underrated comedy, Seth Rogen flick, really funny.
I still need to watch it.
Dude.
The little bit you showed me the other day was hilarious.
It's a very underrated Christmas comedy movie. Check it out. I love all the classics. Chris, what's your favorite? Christmas Story for me is you can't mess with it, even though it runs on TBS 24 hours and you've seen it a million times.
I really like Jingle All the Way.
Oh, God.
Sinbad and Arnold Schwarzenegger.
It's a classic. I need to watch that one again.
You
It's been
do.
a long time.
You need to watch it again. Every time it's on TV.
What was the action figure doll called again? The something man?
Oh,
what the hell is it called? Anyways.
Freak. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
This is such a good one, though.
Yeah. Of course, you got Christmas Vacation, Chevy Chase.
Oh, yeah.
It's pretty sad. I heard that guy's a dick, but man, he's so likable in movies.
Chevy Chase is?
Yeah.
I could see
Heard
that.
he's a complete
He's a
dick.
star. Just like David Spade. All those guys from like that era who got super big, if you see them, even in interviews, on talk shows, they don't even hide it. They're just
dicks.
They really are. They really are.
It can't be that easy to have everyone in public running up to you all the time.
And that's
you
what
can't
I'm
ever
saying.
relax,
like you have to take it. You have to
we
take
get
it for
it.
what
We
is.
walk around.
Those guys
everybody's
can't go,
just clamoring for us.
Yeah, it gets annoying. I'm not trying to go to McDonald's. I'm just like trying to get a
Never
Big
once-
Mac. I'm trying to like sign
Never
autographs.
once have we run into someone that recognized us.
Never once.
Someday.
If I ever do, I'm gonna be like, me?
Like-
Me? You talking to me?
Get the fuck out of here. You don't know who I
You got
am.
me confused with somebody. I do have one of those faces. People tell me I look like people all the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
I don't get that. I'm unique, bro.
You are.
Uniquely ugly.
Yeah. You need, no, you're not.
Now I'm just fishing for compliments, guys.
Yeah, you are.
You're not ugly.
Oh, Lord.
I want to thank the sticker donors since the last freebie episode that we did. Thomas in New York, Luz in Idaho, Aaron in Australia down under, mate. Angela in Washington, and Amy P in, we don't know because you didn't have an address attached. So Amy P, you just donated today.
Well, thank
this
you, Amy.
is the 18th, December 18th that we're recording this. If you're Amy P who donated on the 18th, send us another email with your address so we can send you stickers. Someone else did this a while back, and then they messaged us again saying they didn't get their stickers. If you haven't gotten them, hit us up again, send us your address again.
We definitely need the address.
We'll figure that out. Sometimes it's attached with PayPal, sometimes it's not.
Right.
So,
yeah, we understand sometimes it's a mix-up. You assume it's attached and it's not.
right.
Real quick, let's get to our sponsor, Oh My Gaia. Oh My Gaia is an innovative line of deodorants that inhibit the growth of odor-causing bacteria while maintaining effectiveness. At Oh My Gaia, they use only all-natural paraben and aluminum-free organic ingredients. And we are lucky enough to have our very own scent at Oh My Gaia, which is True Crime Pine. If you guys want to try
fantastic.
that. Right?
It covers up murders. It's multi-purpose.
Dude, anything, like embalming fluid smells, anything, any kind of smells you need covered up, Oh My Guy is got you covered.
Right. And the scents include what?
Fireside.
Fireside.
Yep.
You got
Lumberjack.
My wife wears sweet pea. She smelled great delivering our baby.
Sandalwood. What else? You said sweet pea already. Honeysuckle. Sorry, we don't have the scents right in front of us today.
Hold on, I'm zoning in.
You got this.
We got sandalwood. Don't you have leather?
Leather, yes.
Fantastic.
Lilac.
Lilac.
That's also another one. But there's a ton of scents, guys. You can go on ohmygaia.com, ohmygaia.com, and you can use the code CREEPER, CREEPER, since you're a True Crime Guys listener, and you can get 15% off. She also has beard oil, guys.
This stuff is all perfect stocking stuffers for Christmas, guys. Seriously. Like,
it really is.
Throw some Oh My Gaia in your spouse's stocking. They'll love it.
Yes. Check it out.
Beard oil, whatever.
And if you go in there and you make an order and you say, like, I definitely want lilac and True Crime Pine or whatever.
But I'd also
like to try something else. Just shoot her an email. Shoot Wendy an email on Oh My Gaia and just talk to her. Yeah. A lot of times, you make a purchase, she'll help you out too. Maybe you find another scent that you really like. Yep. And it's a great company. We wear it every day. I'm wearing Fireside today, so we can't complain.
Right.
All right. We got some.
I got a barbershop on right now. That's been
do you?
That's
yeah,
been
I like barbershop.
right
I
now.
ran out actually at barbershop.
Yeah.
So Wendy, if you're listening. No.
All right, we got some Stitcher reviews. We're gonna hit those
we're gonna
first.
hit Stitcher reviews.
Yeah, man.
Stitcher's, give some love over there.
Stitcher's podcast app too, guys.
Oh,
they're
is
important.
it? They're important.
Creepy Kin GA and Amanda the OZ Creeper. So thank you guys for your Stitcher reviews. And then we're going to hit all the international stuff. Ireland. Let's hit Ireland.
Oh, you got Ireland?
For iTunes reviews, we got Finian 1996, Yellow Grenade, and Miss Capucina.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
From the beautiful land of Ireland.
Yes.
Here's some new U.S. reviews. Teach Biz, Irritated, Inconvenienced, Miss Devon 1994, Jordana N, Tungsy, Nap Queen 00, Lauren Kim W, CB Cobain, Tommy Want Wingy 1027, Ellie Watts. Those are the new. These are written reviews, guys. Obviously we don't shout out everyone who just clicks 5 stars, but we do appreciate that very much.
Yes, we just went over 800 in America for iTunes reviews, and that's pretty cool, man.
That's pretty awesome.
1,000. We're gonna hit 1,000 in 2019, no problem.
Yep,
it's coming.
Oh, we got a new one from across the pond here in the UK. Tom Payne, 1985. In Canada, we have Jordan B. 77, Giacomo 91, and Chris Dotson. In Sweden, we have Zabiz and Sarah Klinga. Down under, in Australia, we have Watsy 86. And in France, actually, we have 2 reviews from France.
Where the naked ladies dance.
Murph Dilster and Moisali.
I heard there's a lot of armpit hair over there. Definitely hit up On My Guy, guys.
You cannot.
And girls.
You guys are already. You guys are already natural. Like, you don't want to put aluminum in your hair. That's even crazier, right? That just doesn't.
I'm going
to
say this: those of you who have written reviews, let's get to 1,000, and when we get to 1,000, we're going to give everyone a free car. How about that?
What?
I'm saying 2019, we're coming hot. We need to hit that 1,000 mark. Everyone gets a car. It's
Can
like
you
Oprah.
even say that?
You get a car. You get a car.
Can you? Are you talking like Hot Wheels or something?
I'm just.
Can you even say things like that?
I can say it. Why? It's a free country. I can say whatever I want.
Do we need like a disclaimer? Like, everyone does not really get a free car.
Michael, add that to the end.
Lauren is talking a whole bunch of bullshit and no one gets a free car.
You're not getting nothing, but it'll be cool to see that 1,000.
It would. We'll do something. We'll do like a live Q&A or something affordable.
That's totally as good as a car.
Yeah, totally.
It's just like a fucking matchbox. Oh, man. All right, guys. We've had too much fun. Once again, 2018 was a great year. Thank you for everyone for sharing this show and listening and just whatever you do to help out the show. Little ways, sharing on Instagram, Twitter, whatever.
Yep.
Just telling a friend.
Yeah, that's huge. It goes a long way. Word of mouth is the best.
Yep.
Tell your friends how creepy you are and how weird you are. And if they don't listen the first time, just keep telling them because friends don't listen. I don't listen to my friends. Like when they tell me like, you should watch this on Netflix. I'll be like, I'm going to wait on about 3 or 4 more of those for that same suggestion.
Dude. Friends are dumb.
Yeah. What do they know? What do they know?
Unless they're talking about True Crime Guys.
Right.
Then they're right. And they're smart.
Definitely you should listen.
There's trains only getting rolling, dude. Trains only getting rolling. 2018. We got some good steam going. And 2019, we're going to plow through that wall.
That's right.
It's time.
That's right. We busting out of here.
Busting out. All right, guys. Who busted out? Who was one of the people that busted out of jail in our Pans Ram? Did
dude,
it?
so many people.
So many people. That's what we're doing. We're Pans Ramming this shit.
Freaking Ted Bundy.
Ted Bundy. We're climbing through some fucking ducks. We're jumping out a second-story window.
Yeah, we're not going to build a 30-foot ladder out of scrap steel, though. That is not a good way to bust out.
No, you're right. He busted more than just
Pans
out.
Ram,
He busted every bone in his
ribs
body.
and shit. No, we're not doing that in well, we might, but that will be unrelated to podcast.
Whatever we got to do, man. We got to break an ankle.
That's true. We could do a video where we just break bones somehow.
All right.
You know, maybe if we get to 1,000 reviews.
I'll jump off my roof, guys, and you get a free car.
Oh.
See you in 2019. Thanks for listening.
Keep creeping, guys.
Keep creeping.
True crime guys, in the desert we like a mirage. It's okay if you clicked on us cause you thought we was True Crime Garage. Now we ain't mad at you, sit down, let us talk at you. I'm talking to the creeper army, we out here making murder, get murder, get murder. True crime guys, in the desert we like a mirage. It's okay if you clicked on us cause you thought we was True Crime Garage. Now we ain't mad at you, sit down, let us talk at you. I'm talking to the creeper army, we out here making murder charming.
Lauren is talking a whole bunch of bullshit and no one gets a free car.